Okay. Thank you, Grassroots, and thank you, everyone. You have tuned in today or are here and present to the Board of County Commissioners work session of August 23rd. We'd ask everyone to turn their cell phones off. Thank you. There's a lot of them out there. Thank you. And this is going to be a special meeting. I'm going to take a moment and then call us into a special meeting. As you can tell by the attendance, which is far beyond our usual meetings, unless there's a marijuana factory or some sort of land use, we have a very full crowd today. And so I'm going to ask that everyone be civil with each other, that we discuss the issue and not personalities. It is clearly a contentious issue. We have received numerous emails that we have in a packet here and that have gone through our attorney's office. So we're going to keep nice and calm. And I would like to ask, is there a motion to go into special meeting for the purpose of discussing the Snowmass Creek caucus? Is there a second? Any further discussion? Steve, would this be your?
Let's vote.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I am recusing myself from this discussion. According to the rules, I have both a personal interest and potentially a financial interest in the outcome of where this discussion leads, so I won't be in on the discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Steve, and we will call you back when we get to other items. This item is scheduled for 1 hour and a half, and so we're going to try to keep it on a fairly tight schedule that way. As we begin the meeting, I need to express that prior to understanding or hearing that this was a quasi-judicial matter and be a quasi-judicial conversation, I did speak with Jan and Kathy DeWolf. We had lunch in Elgibel. I bought my own lunch, as I always do, coffee or anything. And I would state that I believe everything that was mentioned at that point is within the letters of the documents that we have received, resulting in kind of what led up to this and what was from their perspective, what led up to this and the process so far. I would say I think the only thing that I heard at that point in time, which I will declare publicly as part of anyone's influence or in anyone's decision-making process, is they were also concerned about how the accounting of funds for water efforts had been used and that there were not as transparent reporting of the projects that had funded as they would have liked. So that was the only thing, again, that I saw that was not within the body of the letters of everything we have seen. Thank you. George.
Ditto, except no lunch. With Jan, and I actually had suggested Jan talk to ComDev to set up a work session.
Is your speaker on?
I had a conversation with Jan as well, but without any lunch, and I suggested, well, you have to, I can't talk any louder without shouting. I suggested we have a work session on this issue.
Pardon me, please. Michael?
I also had a meeting with Jack.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I too had a meeting with Jan, and we just discussed what was in the emails and letters. Nothing further.
Excuse me, this is Gabby, Grassroots, and Library. We'll fix it.
We just can't hear.
Okay.
We know.
Yeah, it should be up in just a moment.
Okay, thank you. We're working on the audio. As you guys may know, we are building a new county building. The old county building is being gutted and renovated. These are our temporary locations. The library is fairly new, and so a lot of the issues about audio are still being worked out. We will try to address those as clearly as possible. Let me be the first to say this is awkward that we have had conversations prior to being told that this was a quasi-judicial hearing. It was only when the ComDev department talked to our attorney about scheduling a work session or meeting on this that it was told that this is a quasi-judicial item. The cure for a quasi-judicial ex parte conversation is to declare it on the record, and the content of that conversation in its full so that there is nothing that is undisclosed that is influencing our opinions or decision-making. Additionally, given that we are a 5-member board, one who lives in this area who has had to recuse himself for those purposes, there would be no one left to make a decision if we were all to conflict ourselves out. And that has been, John, if you would like to elaborate that, how we can proceed on this matter.
Well, Rachel, as you mentioned, this is a quasi-judicial hearing. The reason for that is because there is a specific request for a specific action by the BOCC, the request coming from a qualified elector within the proposed new caucus area. And the evaluation of that request is made against certain criteria which are enumerated within the Home Rule Charter. So you have a specific request for an action which is evaluated against set parameters or criteria that are already established. That is essentially what a quasi-judicial action is. As such, the decision is one that is debated and conducted in the public setting, on the record, for the benefit of anybody who wants to attend the meeting or to listen in later on a recorded format. Okay. And as far as the previous contacts, they are of a, in my opinion at least, an insubstantial content in that they don't go particularly to the evaluation criteria contained within the charter. And as Rachel mentioned, there is never a context within the law that would require the recusal of a participating or deciding board from making a decision. Otherwise, essentially everything comes to a halt, and that is never the ultimate outcome of a determination of an ex parte contact such as we've had here. So in my opinion, the board is qualified to proceed, listen to the request and evaluate it and make a determination, and to either adopt or reject the proposed resolution to recognize a new caucus.
Thank you, John. Okay. Now, I did receive an email from Chelsea last night to outline how we thought we were going to proceed today, so I will try to outline that for the general group. We will hear first again from John Ely on the charter requirements and standards that exist related to the formation of a caucus. We will then hear from the proponents of the caucus, new caucus. We will hear from the opponents of formation of a new caucus. We will allow both of those two sides a few moments if they would like to refer or rebut any. Can you keep turning the volume up? Okay. Then we will take public comments, and I'm going to take a show of hands at that time around the room of how many folks would like to speak. Given the crowd, and if everyone's like to speak, it's probably going to be a 2-minute each type of thing. Then we will bring it back to the board for board discussion. That sounds better. Very good.
It'll be here.
Thank you. Okay, and so with that, I think everyone understands the format that we're going to use. Did any of the board members have a change or different requests on that format? Okay, thank you. So we will begin with John Ely discussing what is in the charter that we need to use that is our basis for decision making.
So for the benefit of everybody who's in attendance and anybody who might be listening in or will listen to this proceeding later, this is a special meeting of the BOCC to entertain this particular request. All statements made here will be part of the record of the decision of the BOCC and therefore available to anybody in the future. The request that has come in has been proffered by Jan Martin, who is a qualified elector within the area of the proposed new caucus, and the request is for a recognition of a new caucus, that being the Snowmass Creek caucus. And of course, the interesting aspect of this is that this new proposed caucus area will be within and part of what has been previously recognized as a Snowmass Capital Caucus. The decision coming to the board for recognition is governed by Article 4 of the Home Rule Charter. The standards for review for the Board of County Commissioners here today is to determine whether or not a qualified elector noticed a meeting that was at a convenient time and place for the purpose of discussing the formation of a new caucus. The board must be satisfied that an informational campaign was conducted to ensure that all qualified electors, and a qualified elector is somebody who's essentially a resident over 18. Doesn't necessarily have to be a registered elector, somebody who's registered to vote, but somebody who could register to vote. As well as, in addition to qualified electors, as well as non-resident owners of real property. Real property is not distinguished as between, say, property interest in dirt as opposed to water. All of that, both of those types of interests are considered real property. As to whether or not an information campaign was conducted to ensure that all qualified electors and non-resident real property owners in the proposed caucus area knew of the date, the time, the place, and the purpose of the informational meeting. And at that meeting, there was a decision reached by the majority of those individuals in attendance who are eligible to participate, which again is qualified electors plus non-resident property owners, that a new caucus should be formed. The evaluation of those steps needs to be completed by the BOCC, an examination of the materials presented to the board, and if those items, if those steps have been determined to have occurred, the language of the Home Rule Charter requires that the board designate and recognize the Snowmass Creek Caucus. In addition to those requirements for an initial meeting and a vote as to whether or not a new caucus should be formed, there needs to be a recognition of other charter standards. Among those are, and essentially these are limited to those, is that to the greatest extent possible, the caucus area, the proposed caucus area, shall reflect a geographically contiguous area. It's not necessary, but to the greatest extent possible, it should reflect a geographically contiguous area with social, economic, cultural, or environmental communities of interest. Only one recognized caucus in a geographic area is permitted, which is to say, if the Snowmass Creek Caucus is recognized, that portion then of area is therefore deleted from the Snowmass Capital Caucus area. The charter does not go into or allow for evaluation of motivation into the formation of a caucus. Only that a majority of people attending a meeting called for the consideration of that question voted in the affirmative. It's also not part of the charter considerations as to any potentially negative effects to the operation of any other caucuses within the county. The caucus system within the Pickens County Charter is very unique. In fact, to my knowledge, it's the only mechanism within any local government structure within the state of Colorado that affords this type of a citizen group the recognition to have a direct line of communication to the BOCC on any issue of concern. It's also the only vehicle, to my knowledge, in any local government in the state of Colorado that affords non-residents a voice to participate in local government affairs. The language of the charter is written broadly to encourage the formation of caucuses as a vehicle to inform the elected board of the desires and wishes, concerns, etc., of a collective group of citizens and non-resident property owners. So, that is why we're here.
Thank you. John, just a couple of questions. Does the charter outline the method of communication with each potential voter within a caucus district? Does it say it has to be registered mail or return receipt requested, or?
No. In fact, the only evaluation criteria in that regard is that the Board of County Commissioners is satisfied that an information campaign occurred to ensure that all qualified electors and non-resident property owners were aware of the meeting that they could participate in. Obviously, I think it would be easy to conclude that actual notice to all qualified electors and non-resident property owners is difficult. So the board has to evaluate the steps that were taken and determine whether or not they were reasonable. And if in their execution, a reasonable individual within the proposed caucus area would have been informed of such a meeting and had the opportunity to participate because the meeting was held at a convenient time and place.
Thank you. Any board questions for John? Michael?
John, is there a minimum size for a caucus?
There is not.
So a caucus can consist of one person?
There is no minimum size. Essentially, with the exception of an ability to coordinate directly with the community development, in the formulation of a caucus area specific master plan, and the recognition of liaisons between the county government and representatives of the caucus, and certain financial benefits that will assist caucuses in their notification efforts to members for meetings and so forth on an annual basis. Really what the caucus system within the county charter accomplishes is simply a vehicle within which groups of people can organize and address the county commission. Without a caucus, an individual or any group of people can get together and accomplish that same thing, just not having those benefits of a dedicated master plan and so forth. But this is to allow an aggregate voice where people's opinions can be amplified with their neighbors and with other residents and non-property owners, or non-resident property owners within the caucus area to address concerns and present opinions and requests to the BOCC.
Let me ask a further question. John, there's no, this request comes from within a caucus, an existing caucus.
That's correct.
So there's no procedure for secession or separation from the greater caucus?
There is no procedure for a de-annexation, if you will, from a caucus area. For example, if an area within an established caucus simply wanted to withdraw from participation in that caucus and not have that caucus speak for a group of individuals without necessarily forming a new caucus, there is no recognized ability to do that within the charter. However, the charter authority, so to speak, grants any dissenting opinions and minority viewpoints that may have been expressed during a caucus meeting or a caucus vote to be forwarded to the BOCC so that the BOCC can evaluate, is this an opinion held by a unanimous collective within a caucus area or a slim majorities, for example. The only real mechanism for withdrawing from a caucus area that is clearly recognized within the charter is what's being employed here, which is the establishment of a new caucus, which by default accomplishes a withdrawal from an existing caucus.
Thank you. George?
A couple of questions, John. So this would be similar to what we went through with the Maroon Creek, Castle Creek caucus in terms of the separation there and setting up two separate caucuses from one.
Similar.
And as you said earlier, in terms of our role here, in terms of the ability to recognize or not recognize a new caucus, we're to look at sort of like a checklist to see whether everything is conformed to the charter in terms of setting up a caucus. But we may or may not have any discretion in that.
The discretion that the board has to exercise is in its determination as to whether the requirements for a meeting and for the recognition of a caucus, the constitution of the caucus, in other words, is it an area of geographic contiguity to the greatest extent possible? Does it reflect a commonality of interest or a community of interest? Apart from that, it is an evaluation of how an organizational meeting was conducted. And if the board or anyone would refer to the electronic copy of the packet, which is online, it's the last 3 pages of that packet, and that is the extent of the charter discussion of caucuses within Bicken County, and particularly section 4.1.1.
So, but you said earlier that, talked about a vote by the caucus members to determine whether it was majority or a slim majority. It sounded like there was some discretion there.
Well, in that, I was referring to the, let's see in this section right now, but there isn't within the charter is recognized the ability for a minority voice within the caucus area to be heard. So if there is a discussion on a particular point of concern, and the vote by the attending members of the caucus was 51% yes and 49% no, then the 49% have the ability to express that minority opinion so that the board can evaluate the reasons for that opinion and the justifications for it.
So then, given that there is some discretion from the board in terms of our
The board
decision,
has discretion in taking an action in the future, for example, establishing a zoning scheme that reflects what the caucus may have recommended for their master plan. In the context of the recognition of the charter, or of the caucus, the charter allows the board to take a look at specifically the items contained in 4.1.1 and evaluate whether or not an organizational meeting has occurred and complied with those requirements. And if they have, then pursuant to 4.1.2, the BOCC shall recognize the caucus. It's an interesting step to notice also that within the construct of the charter, caucuses are formed not by the BOCC but by citizens themselves. So a qualified elector or a non-resident property owner may establish a caucus. And that is stated clearly within the charter. So what we are here to do today is to determine whether or not that charter should be recognized by the Board of County Commissioners.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions for John?
Rachel.
Yeah, Michael?
John, what's to prevent the caucuses from splitting into ever smaller caucuses?
Nothing.
Nothing. But it would diminish the purpose of the caucus, wouldn't it?
It would potentially diminish their voice because instead of a caucus vote, a vote representing a large segment of the population, a caucus vote may represent a smaller segment of the population. I think that the organizational difficulties and day-to-day chore of running a caucus and trying to assemble people for meetings and disseminating information and trying to get feedback will dissuade the formation of caucuses that are simply too small to generate much of a participation from the people within that caucus area. So I don't think I would foresee a situation where the caucuses continue to split, for example, into ever smaller groups.
You know, I would just note, for the record, for the audience here, that as we dealt with the Maroon Capitol Creek caucus split, and as this has come forward, it has struck me that our caucus section of the charter is pretty vague, and it really has not been updated. It would, of course, require a charter vote by the public, but it's so old it doesn't mention email. It doesn't mention websites. It doesn't mention any of those types of communication, which are the modern forms of communication on everything. It doesn't deal with details such as Michael is raising. Is there a size that's too small to be a caucus? It doesn't mention whether, what happens when a caucus kind of goes defunct, which was a little bit of what was going on with Maroon Castle. The Castle side was just very inactive, and the Maroon side wanted to get active again. So it's pretty lean in terms of how caucuses boundaries are drawn, which sometimes deliberately exclude neighborhoods or other communities that are really very nearby but are just not wanted for whatever purposes as people are originally drawing those caucus lines. So we do have some pretty limited guidance on this, and it would probably be something that the community may want to take up in form of a charter committee in the future to see if there could be better guardrails or side rails put on the caucus process, but there are not those sort of details in the charter now. So, Rachel? Yes, Patty?
In speaking of the Maroon and Castle Creek issue, it was about a year and a half ago that because of just lack of activity, Maroon wanted to become more, just so the public knows this, yeah. Maroon wanted to be more active. Castle Creek is still in the process of trying to form themselves again. What I think is new for me, and I think for the rest of us here, is that there wasn't a strong voice from the Castle Creek side saying we don't want Maroon Creek to split off. So I think that's the difficulty for me here is in all of the emails and the letters that we have received, which I thank the public for sending to us, we're hearing this, maybe you should have time to work it out. And so that's kind of a thought process for me as part of hearing this comment today is, is there still a wish to maybe unite on better terms, or is there really a wish to separate? So those are things that I think are important for me that we didn't hear when we separated out the Maroon and Castle Creek caucuses. Thank you.
Thank you. And if there's no other board questions for our attorney, I will now ask Jan Martin or whoever is presenting in favor of the separate caucus.
Well, according to...
You need to come up.
And I'm going to ask people to either sit at the table or when we do public comment, we'll get the microphone there so that we can hear this. But we have your letter, Jan. Perhaps if you just want to recap some of that or whatever your comments were to the record.
What I'd like to do, I mean, we are in compliance with Article 4 of the Home Rule Charter. We have met all the criteria of that charter and feel that we should be recognized as a separate caucus. We did have a qualified elector call for a initial meeting that was the date, time, location, and purpose was stated in that notice. That notice went out 5 different times. It went out 2 times from the separation committee. A second one I have come across here, which was sent by email to everyone. It went out 3 times by the existing caucus. 4 of those notices were electronic notices. One of them was by the government mail. That meeting was held, that initial meeting was held. 94 electors showed up. There are approximately 123 residences back there. So according to the Article 4, a simple majority is enough to create a caucus. A decided majority voted for separation of the caucus. Many of those people are here today, and I have over 30 letters from people who aren't able to attend today stating that they wish you would honor their vote because it was done according to the Article 4 of the Home Rule Charter. Following that, we drew a proposed caucus area map plan, which is also requisite of our Article 4. Article 4, as John stated, says that the proposed area should be contiguous to the extent possible. Ours is in fact totally contiguous. So we have met all of the criteria of Article 4, and we wish to be recognized as a separate Snowmass Creek caucus. The letters, the people attending, actually exceed the vote that was cast, and so we just feel like we would be better served being self-determinant. We are sparsely populated relative to the other side, and we have larger acreages. It's very difficult for any caucus to have a one policy fits all. And so we would just like to be self-determinant, and since we did meet all the criteria, would respectfully request you formally acknowledge that.
Thank you. And you mentioned additional letters. We're not going to do that. Right?
Yep.
I appreciate the desire to, but we're not going to do that. We're going to hold the meeting together. If you have additional letters you'd like to present for the public record, just give them to Jeanette. You can maybe pass them around as a packet if the board would like to flip through them while we're listening. But we'd like to make sure those are in the record. Okay, and then I believe that Chelsea Condon and Mark Harvey are going to make comments from those who are not proponents of this.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I think before I sit down, I would like to hand out a packet to each of the commissioners. This is a packet of letters that were not submitted by Thursday close of business deadline and are not in the material you have or may not be in the material you have. And the cover of this packet includes a resolution that was passed unanimously by the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus Board at our last meeting on August 19th, prior to this hearing, and was intended to be in your packet but didn't.
If you want to just pass it, we'll pass it around because the wires are here are kind of.
There's a little spider web up here. Jump rope championships. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Thank you on behalf of myself and Mark Harvey for this opportunity to speak with all of you this afternoon about regarding the application for the new Snowmass Creek Caucus. I am Chelsea Brundage. I live at 1755 Snowmass Creek Road at the confluence of Capitol and Snowmass Creeks. I have been a resident of Old Snowmass for 19 years, raised my family there. I have served on the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus Board for two or three different times in that over 18 years, and have worked as a committee member on the 2003 master plan that was submitted to the county and now is still in effect for Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus, and have worked most extensively on the water issues that pertain to protecting healthy flows in Snowmass Creek, flows and water quality in Capitol Creek. And I am here with Mark because the board of the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus asked the two of us to represent the existing caucus at this hearing. There are a number of other people from the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus in the audience who I'm sure would like to speak today, and their comments will be their own. And you have the packet I just handed out. So I'd like to start by reading to you the resolution that, because for the benefit of the people in the audience, the resolution that the caucus passed on August 19th. Resolution to keep Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus unified. Whereas the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus was established in 1974 by resident visionaries, and whereas the caucus has been an effective, deliberative body in preserving the natural surroundings of the Snowmass and Capitol Creek valleys, and whereas the caucus has worked diligently and successfully to protect Snowmass and Capitol Creek and keep riparian habitats healthy and intact, and whereas the caucus has acted as an effective advisory body to Pitkin County on land use planning, and whereas the caucus has endeavored to study and advocate for the health of our wildlife and plant communities, and whereas the caucus has served as a meeting point, a sounding board, a social organization helping to bond friendships, resolve disputes, and introduce neighbors to neighbors, and whereas the caucus has admittedly made mistakes in the process and communication surrounding a recent draft master plan, And whereas the caucus can and must do better in communicating issues, meetings, and agendas to constituents whom it serves, as well as receiving comments and suggestions from constituents whom it serves. And whereas the caucus has managed to amicably resolve difficult issues, differences, and disagreements over many decades since its formation. And whereas Article 4.5 of Picken County Home Rule Charter states, quote, recognized caucus areas to the greatest extent possible shall reflect geographically contiguous areas with social, economic, cultural, and environmental communities of interest. There shall be only one recognized caucus in each geographical area. And whereas our two valleys share a common geography, a glorious history of intrepid pioneers, and many friendships that transcend watersheds, be it resolved that the board of the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus seeks reconciliation, believes it is desirable and possible to resolve differences, earnestly hopes and endeavors to keep the caucus intact, one unified body of friends and neighbors, singularly prepared and eager to meet the future while preserving the valley's heritage and beauty. Be it further resolved that the board of the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus respectfully asks that the Board of County Commissioners request mediation between the two parties to resolve differences. Hereby unanimously approved the 16th day of August 2016 by the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus, Rob Sinclair, Board President. So, sorry about that lengthy reading, but I wanted to make sure we had shared that with everybody in the room. The Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus has a 42-year history of being a collective group of citizens working in our two connected valleys together, and very effectively, in my opinion and our opinion, to protect this very beautiful part of rural Picken County. We have achieved results that have been formative for preserving the quality of life in our valleys and also instrumental for Picken County in zoning and planning. For example, and this is not a complete list, we were effective in stopping the proposed Haystack ski area, which was to be developed in Old Snowmass. The Child family personally gave up millions of dollars to fight off that development, which would have been devastating for the valleys as we now know them. We worked to stop a logging proposal on East Sopris Creek. We have directly contributed to county guidelines on agricultural buildings and on greenhouses. We have been active in implementing county policies to prevent noxious weeds with information campaigns and organized weed pulling events, which if you haven't attended, I highly recommend them. We have been very active in advocating for the conservation and protection of in-stream flows in Snowmass Creek. We challenged the state of Colorado to improve its in-stream flow program, and were successful with the state adopting the first responsive, if you will, or stair-step in-stream flow right in the state of Colorado to protect Snowmass Creek, that in-stream flow right, and the maintenance of that right, which is a constant preoccupation of the caucus, is now an example of the Colorado Water Conservation Board as it does work on other streams around Colorado. That in-stream flow right for Snowmass Creek, which we worked hard to achieve, has been the basis for a unique and widely recognized trans-basin partnership between water users in the town of Snowmass Village, which is in the Brush Creek watershed, and the neighbors and landowners in the Snowmass Creek watershed. We are two watersheds that rely on, residents in two watersheds or basins that rely on a single creek for water, and working together, we have been able to develop an engineering analysis of the future of flows in Snowmass Creek, looking at different build-out and climate change scenarios. That has been heralded by the state as a very useful and effective document. That document has become the basis for water conservation and water conservation investments in Snowmass Water and Sanitation District, including their management of Ziegler Reservoir. We have recently produced a booklet, which I brought with me because I wrote it, called The Water User's Guide to Protecting Flows in Snowmass Creek. This was funded generously and modestly by a Snowmass Creek neighbor, and is a booklet I'm hoping to have the opportunity to share with our neighbors in Snowmass Creek since it was produced for them. And finally, the partnership between the caucus and the Snowmass Water and Sanitation District is going to be featured in a Colorado Foundation for Water Education tour that's coming to the Valley on September 12th to look at innovative and collaborative water practices around the state. And the caucus and the Snowmass District are an example of that. To go on our list, we developed the first caucus master plan in 2003, which we understand served as an example for other caucuses. We helped shape county policy on the broadband. And recently, under the leadership of Mark Harvey, we launched a new biota committee to understand and monitor the flora and fauna in our valley. The point of that list is to reinforce the fact that we have been active in many issues over the last 40 years, and as we go forward, we are stronger together. We are stronger if we are able to draw on the considerable talent in both of our valleys and the resources in both of our valleys. We are a volunteer board. We are composed of residents from both Capitol Creek and Snowmass Creek. We are composed of residents that are full-time residents and second homeowners. We are democratically elected. And we try hard to do good work on the issues that affect all of us. We aren't perfect. We are grateful for our colleagues on the board who volunteer to do accounting and mailing and organizing and thinking and writing and emailing, and those are not necessarily areas in which each of those individuals is a professional, and so we make mistakes. But we are open and we are not sneaky, and we're proud of that history and would like to go forward working as one caucus in the area that you have on the map above you. And I'm going to turn it over to Mark Harvey.
Well, thanks for hearing us out today. My name is Mark, and I grew up in this valley. I'm a Snowcap board member. I help manage the Harvey Ranch at the head of the Snowmass Creek. And as Chelsea mentioned, this caucus is 42 years old. If you think about it, 42 years ago, Highway 82 was 2 lanes. Glenwood Canyon was 2 lanes. We didn't have a high-speed gondola. We certainly didn't have Starbucks. And I don't even think there was a home rule charter. 42 years ago, Richard Nixon was president. So it's been a long time that this caucus has been working. That's a long period of time in this valley. And a lot has happened in this valley for the better and for the worse. There's some great things about with the change, and there's some things that aren't so great. But there's been a lot of pressure on the valley in terms of growth. And whatever you want to say about Snowmass Creek and Capitol Creek today, it's in pretty good shape. Ecologically, we've preserved a lot of the heritage, a lot of the pioneering heritage. There's a lot of open space. Those 2 valleys are in pretty good shape. And the Snowmass Caucus can't take full credit for that, but I think it can take some credit. I think a lot of these things Chelsea mentioned represents some of the things that have preserved those 2 valleys, that have made those 2 valleys great places to live. And open a real estate brochure, it certainly hasn't depressed real estate values. So I think if you're going to effectively dissolve an organization like this, an organization that's 42 years old, you should do it with real deliberation. You should do it openly, and it should be done for good reason. And with respect to Jan, I don't think what's happened over the last few months has met any of those criteria. I want to say a few words about managing this caucus, or having a single caucus for this geography, being better than breaking it up into various caucuses. If the 2 watersheds of the 2 streams were truly different geographically, if they were totally separate valleys, you might have a good argument to have 2 caucuses. But even though the streams have independent water headwaters, one at Snowmass Lake and the other at Capitol Lake, those 2 streams, those 2 creeks, they cross similar terrain. They cross a designated wilderness area. They cross national forest. They cross ranch lands. And ultimately, they have a confluence near where Chelsea lives, near Rocky Mountain Institute. And I know a confluence is kind of a heavy-handed metaphor, but I think it works in this case. And I think the caucus is indeed a confluence. I think it's a confluence of ideas. I think it's a confluence of neighbors. I think it's a confluence of friendships for 42 years. If you think about what the caucus deals with, things like water, roads, wildlife, wildfire, most of these things don't respect arbitrary political boundaries. Most of these things follow landscapes, they follow riverbeds, and sometimes they follow the wind. Take wildfire, for example, something that we're all concerned with, and we discuss at caucus meetings. It's an important part of the caucus management, something that will face a lot more in the future to come with climate change. If a wildfire starts in Capitol Creek and some of the scrub oak, and you get a southerly wind, all of a sudden it's not a Capitol Creek problem. All of a sudden it's a Snowmass Creek problem too. And that's kind of a good example of why it's important to be face to face, why it's important to talk, why it's important to manage something well together with wildfire mitigation. I think the basalt fire marshals get it. That's why they have a substation at the confluence. That's why they like to talk to the caucus and see if we're doing our job as valleys and as neighbors. So that's one example of managing things together, how it works better. Here's another example. The caucus right now is about 30,000 acres if you add up all the lands together. That's a chunk of land. It's kind of like a little mini national park, if you will. And there's just a huge number of species, flora and fauna, thousands of different species, literally. The caucus is getting more and more in the business of looking at this as a big unit, not just looking at where a road goes, how big a house is, the color of a house, those sorts of things. We're trying to become better stewards as caucus members, and that's why we started the Biota Committee. But like wildfire, wildlife and plant communities don't follow artificial boundaries either. You can take our elk population that we all love so much. They calve out often in the Snowmass side, in the Snowmass Creek Valley, and then when fall comes, they migrate on over to the Capitol Creek side. And they are not following a political boundary. Take our plant communities, the upland scrub, the sage communities. They cross boundaries, and so do all the animals that eat and live there, live and nest there. So to me, that's just another argument, since we are trying to be better and better stewards of the land, as to why we should look at these two valleys together as one caucus. You'll get better results. Any biologist will tell you when you talk about wildlife corridors, contiguous geography, if you look at it as one unit and manage it with one mind. I want to talk about another role, and I'll try to be brief here. There's an unwritten role for the caucus that I think is extremely important, and that's the role of being a sounding board, a gathering place, an association, almost like a grange in the old days. And it helps neighbors meet neighbors. It improves communication among the valleys. It encourages cooperation. And I've met a number of people at snowcap meetings or snowcap picnics, picking up trash, that I never would have met literally probably in my life. And I've learned a ton from them. It encourages these conversations that you wouldn't get otherwise. The two valleys have a real shared history of cooperation. In the old days, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, Snowmass Creek neighbors would help Capitol Creek neighbors put up hay. They'd help in brandings, cattle brandings. There's old pictures in the Historical Society about this. They're beautiful photos of these two communities helping each other and not separating, not being isolated. Children from Snowmass Creek attended schools in Capitol Creek. Today, that goes on. In the ranching community, if you lose a stray cow, your neighbor will pick it up and tell you. We have cows that run off our ranch and run off into the monastery, and we'll get a call, and they'll say, we've got some of your cattle down here, and we'll feed them until you show up in November or whatever and pick them up. And we get cattle that come onto our ranch, and sometimes we give them back too. So I think the point is a body like this, connected by geography, connected by history, connected by friendships, connected by wildlife, plant communities, it's something that you don't split apart easily. I think it's something that takes deliberation. There aren't that many organizations in this valley that are 42 years old. That's like a quarter of our history since the pioneers came. So I think this should be done with real concern, very carefully and very thoughtfully. Chelsea?
Thanks, Mark. So the other topic that Mark, that the caucus board has given some consideration to and wanted to share concerns with the Board of County Commissioners had to do with the process that was described in the creation or the application for the proposed new Snowmass Creek caucus. And John Ely shared different aspects of the Home Rule Charter that outline the process for creating a new caucus. And I guess I would refer you to comments today or letters and packets from Dave Nixa, who lives in the Snowmass Creek watershed, Sue Helm, and others who have spoken specifically as Snowmass Creekers to what they understood or experienced with respect to the process of creating the and voting for the proposed Snowmass Creek caucus. I would just say more generally on behalf of the caucus, that of the existing caucus, that there were several members of our board who live on the Snowmass Creek side and several of our Snowmass Creek neighbors who have come to the Snowmass Capitol Creek caucus and indicated that they had some real concerns about the information campaign that was conducted to explain the background and rationale for the proposal for a new caucus. Section 4.1, as John Ely mentioned earlier, says that an information campaign shall be conducted to ensure that all qualified electors and non-resident property owners in the proposed caucus area know the date, time, place, and purpose of the meeting. And from what we have heard, I'm not going to name names, of course, from many people, several people, was that they heard there was a vote, but they had no idea what the vote was about, that they were informed that there was a vote coming, but they had not heard of any opportunity to participate in a discussion of the issues leading up to it. There's an email in your packet on the 4th of July, 1 week before the vote was taken, on the 11th of July, indicating that the vote was planned 1 week hence, which to the existing caucus's mind was short notice, and we have been rightfully criticized of short notice as well. So that similarly seemed to be short. There's an email in your packet that indicates that Shieldo Mesa got an email on July 10th indicating that there would be a vote and an explanation of the issues 1 day hence. So on the basis of what we have heard and observed and some of the information that's been shared with us, we have concerns that an informational campaign may not have actually been conducted to inform neighbors in our valleys of the proposal to create a new caucus and in effect break apart the caucus that we have now. And it seems logical that there would have been some outreach to us. There would be some outreach to the existing caucus about that purpose, since it would have such a profound effect on the caucus as it now stands. By way of comparison, when the existing caucus launched the information campaign to notice the public meeting, which was the first of any number needed to discuss the draft master plan, we put up posters on stop signs, we mailed a postcard to all residents, we put ads in papers, we sent e-blasts to all members, which may be one thing we did do right, but we did it extensively. So that was that. The issue of an information campaign being conducted is one that is of concern to us.
And I'll wrap this up here. Just to continue with what Chelsea said, I didn't hear about the vote until 4 days before it happened. The only reason I heard about it was because a friend emailed me about the vote. Same with our ranch managers, same with the people that work on our ranch. I talked to a lot of people who didn't know what the vote was about on the streets and at the vote itself. I think there was quite a bit of confusion. So I don't think the noticing was sufficient. I don't think the discussion was sufficient. If we're going to talk about boundaries, and I hope it doesn't come to this, but if you look at these boundaries being drawn up, they seem a little arbitrary to me. Why would Lazy O be on the Snowmass Creek caucus when all the houses face the Capitol Creek drainage? Why is Gateway Community in the Capitol Creek caucus when it's, literally on the Snowmass Creek, what becomes the Snowmass Creek? So I hope it doesn't come to this, but these boundaries seem capricious. And then just wrapping it up, I think sometimes it's easier to break things apart than to settle your differences and work together. And we see this all over the world. It's sort of symptomatic of what's happening all over the world, brother against brother, families divided, etc. We think making the effort to stay together is worth it. We acknowledge our shortcomings as a caucus. We acknowledge that the master plan offended and upset people, the draft master plan. We acknowledge we could do better with communication. As Chelsea said, there's lots to improve on. I don't think anything was underhanded, though. I don't think anything was ill will. And it's characteristic of some things that sometimes happen in volunteer organizations. The caucus has expressed contrition on paper in the resolution. Tried to do it by phone call. And since this vote has happened, we've had 2 meetings, one with probably 50 people, board members and citizens alike. And the sentiment of that room, if I read it correctly, was one of people wanting to do better, wanting to settle differences, wanting to remain as one body. And we've tried to communicate our eagerness to do that and to mend fences with mediation as possible. So in sum, given the long history of this caucus, given the fact that it's done some really good work in the Valley, given its willingness to work out differences, we respectfully request that the board not permit the splitting of the caucus. And we request that the board encourage mediation between the 2 parties. Thank you very much.
Now we're going to see if there is rebuttal from either side. Briefly, sir, we already missed. No, yeah. As I said, any rejoinder. We're going to go with Jan, who has been the representative here. Well, please come on up. Well, I apologize if there is some confusion on that, Jan. I said the public comment, which is after the 2 presenters, would try to be limited to 2 minutes. Well, you can take your time because they had plenty of time, please.
I'd just like to start by saying this vote, and again, it was a vote. This vote had a considerable number of people come out and vote who apparently knew what they were voting for. As I've said on many occasions, it was a better turnout than you guys get for your election. So I think people knew what they were voting for. In addition, there was a table, as you've seen in the voting procedure, which is in your package. There was a table where it said more info, please. Sue Helm was there manning her point of view. Other people were there manning their point of view. There was also written material, Sue's letters, my letters, other materials for people to read for those who weren't fully informed or didn't feel that they were fully informed. I'd also like to say that this is about representation, not water, not elk, not deer, who can cross regardless of where a caucus boundary is. This has nothing to do with animal migrations. And we're not dissolving a caucus, as Mark said. We're forming a new one. We're not dissolving the old one. Any water issue can still be conducted by the existing caucus. That water does not stop at the T. It continues on down. Similarly, animals will wander back and forth. Maybe we should include Emma in the caucus if we're taking migratory lanes as part of the criteria here. I would also like to comment on the fact that many of us who are seeking separation were part of this history of the caucus. As you all know, or most of you, Patty, you weren't on the board, but most of you know I was the one who led the charge on the land use change, on the agricultural. Additionally, Chelsea, in terms of the weed initiative, that was mine as well, not to mention any number of other people who have had initiatives from our side of the so-called caucus area, and are also part of the history. And if the history and if the good works are that good, why do we have this vote to separate? Why do we have 94 people coming out? Why do we have such a large majority wishing to leave if everything was done so well? Regarding fire mitigation, if only. I found out in May when I went to the meeting, my only meeting, to express my concerns with the master plan. I heard at that meeting from Rob Sinclair that there was a fire mitigation program, that Snowmass Creek Road was supposed to be the pilot program for that, and that on July 20th, each of us along the road would have the ability to have 5-by-7 piles of wood that the fire department would come along, chip, and take away. I hurried home and registered for that online and was called a week before to say that program had been canceled because nobody had been noticed about it. So, I mean, if there's concern about fire mitigation and these things, you have to communicate to the people. Regarding the notice, again, I repeat, there were 5 notices sent out. 3 by the existing caucus, 2 by us. There were plenty of people who were noticed on this issue. You say you did such a great job in terms of when you had to communicate. Again, even on your last meeting, there was 1 day notice prior to that meeting. On the noticing of the master plan, that master plan was under consideration for 1.5 years, and nobody was noticed then. Nobody was asked for their input. But again, this is not about a master plan. It's not about water. It's not about history. It's about representation. We would like to represent ourselves. We have a numerical disadvantage of 3-1, and we feel we can better represent ourselves. And to clear up the question about Lazy O, which keeps coming up, Lazy O voted themselves. It was their decision to come with this caucus. That they were not included in the initial part because we didn't think it was fair to presume that they wanted to, for the very reasons that you raise, because their access is adjacent to both Snowmass Creek Road and Capitol Creek. So we left it up to that subdivision to be self-determinant, just like we would like to be. I have a letter in my packet from Steve Bremmel, the president of Lazy O, signifying that they wish to join our caucus. So I'd like to put that to bed as well. So thank you.
Jane?
Yeah. I don't.
1 second, sir. I'm sorry. We're just going to stick to the primary one. But Jan, I'd like to ask you the question because it was raised. What was the information campaign like, if you could outline that for us?
The information campaign contained in the article suggests just information regarding the meeting, noticing the meeting. And in that, we sent out, and you guys have in your packet, our initial thing regarding that. I followed it up, actually, Sue. And the reason Sue's letters and Mark's letters are included in our package was because, in fairness to them, I wanted to represent their side, their thoughts, as well as ours, which is why you guys got those. Information was sent out twice. When Sue sent her letter out, I sent another letter out, and again referenced the date, time, place, and purpose of that vote. Prior to that, and you said, Chelsea, that it would have been nice had we notified the board. Rob Sinclair was notified every single step of the way. After John McBride and I met, and I came back and said to,
Let's address the board, not the audience.
this is the board. Oh.
Okay, us.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking to talk to you. Okay.
It's okay,
All
I can
right.
hear you.
I thought it did. But at any rate, after I came back, John and I had met initially and were looking for compromise, didn't find any, and I said to him at the time, I think then separation is our only alternative, and the two of us said rather than, and John agreed, and rather than have just the two of us, I said to him, I will go out and canvass 15 to 20 people or so to see what their thoughts are, whether there's any enthusiasm for this. There turned out to be. Came back, talked to John, because the caucus had set a June 14th vote, final vote for the existing master plan, suggested we not have that vote because it would probably turn into a shouting match, and there was an appetite for separation. After I spoke with John, who was going to call Rob Sinclair, asked that I do it. I called Rob, told him what was going on, told him that we were going to start an outreach program, which we did for 5 weeks. I have a stack of over almost 50 letters there, people asking to separate at that time. I'll be happy to give those to you as well. And I informed Rob when we had those 50 letters and told him I was going to go to community development. I met with, and I told him I would call him when I got back to let him know the results. Met with community development. They asked that we have a formal vote. We did. It came back, called Rob, told Rob that we were having a formal vote. The caucus has been informed all the way. If Mark did not hear about this till 4 days before the vote, I just don't know what's going on, because that notice was sent to Rob Sinclair as well as everyone else who is, as you guys know, on a board, that is the correct procedure. You go through the president disseminates the information to the board members. So I don't know how that was was left out at any rate. So,
Chelsea, if you'd like to respond at all, otherwise we'll go to public comments.
No, I just wanted to make sure, Jan, you know that of course I recognize your contribution to the weeds and the agricultural buildings. I didn't name who on the caucus had contributed what, but you were on the board then, and that was your good work.
Okay, well, just as a little check-in, I know this meeting is going to run long, at least a half hour over what we had allocated. It's now about 2:10. We are going to start with the public comments on this item. And what I'm going to ask is that we go from the rows across and back, just start with Sue all the way across and zigzag across. That way we should have a mix of opinions that come up to the podium. And it's your choice. You can stand at the podium or at the table, but for the recording and for everyone else to hear, we need you to come to the podium. I am going to ask, since we've heard pretty extensively from some main representatives of both sides of this issue, that you keep your comments brief, approximately 2.5 minutes. Sue? And we have received and read numerous letters from all of you.
Thank you. We'll try this microphone. Is this working okay?
Sounds good.
And we thank you all. Please put up with this. I don't hear well, so my antics at the first were trying to work with the people with the sound system that they do have in this room now that connects with hearing aids, so it's a big...
Oh, cool.
I understand that there are frustrations in the whole of the Snowmass Capitol Creek area, and that there's also a big lack of adequate communication by all involved. I've been involved for 25 years with the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus, and it's my sincere hope that the differences can be worked out. We observed several issues and deficiencies that call the validity of the separation vote into question. First, we heard on the 4th of July that we were to vote, and I received that by an email, that we were to vote for a new caucus on the following Monday. Many of the residents in the Upper Capitol Creek Caucus did not hear about the vote for separation. Consequently, the majority of the property owners and residents, those that did not receive the notice, those who were not in touch during or were in town during that week, or had previous plans that could not be broken with a 1 week's notice, were denied a say in a matter of importance for their future. It was stipulated that there could be no proxy votes, that nobody that didn't happen to be right there at that time with 1 week's notice, it didn't matter. They couldn't have a say in this. Certain residents were told one side of the issue. In this campaign, this information campaign this month and a half, and I was contacted, and I did know that there was some thought of this, but had no idea that the vote was imminent or coming up. And certain residents were given one side of the issue, and most of those were ones that came to vote. I did pull out when Jan talked about the information campaign, and I did ask her, and she said, well, you know, it's not our business to tell both sides of the story, but in a letter to Kevin on July 7th, she said that having a fair discussion, talked about having a fair discussion of the issues. She stated, it is not our purpose to provide a forum for the caucus any more than Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump is required to provide an alternative point of view to potential voters. Some people were given one side of the story. There was never a general meeting to present the pros and cons, so everybody in the valley could hear both sides of the story. And that really is my major problem with this whole thing. Okay, at the gathering to vote, there was no structured time.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to make it really short.
Okay, we'll pick it up here. There was no structured time for a meeting to discuss issues, and the room was so noisy that there was no opportunity for meaningful discussion. Yes, I was there, but there was no general sit down and discuss things. Okay, let's skip this.
Yeah, your time is kind of up, and again, we read a number of those things in the letter you sent us.
Okay, yeah, couple more, just two more.
I'm going to put on my stopwatch.
Okay, all right.
So, thank you. Coming across this front row, anyone care to speak? No, we're going across the front row. Now or forever hold your peace. Sir, come on up, please. Thank you. And just state your name and where you live for the record.
My name is Art Martin. I'm Jan Martin's husband, and I've been at the side of her doing this over this last several months. I'd like to hit this notion of the information campaign being inadequate. I think that's totally false. The issues were being discussed back and forth for many months prior to Jan actually starting this initiative. There was 5 or 6 weeks of information going back and forth where people could have questions. I think it insults the intelligence of the voters in our valley to say that they didn't understand what they were voting on. I was at the vote. I talked to a number of people. They knew precisely what they were voting on, and that goes to the issue of representation. And meaning whatever good works the caucus has done, and people in both valleys have been a part of that, the issue is we don't feel adequately represented by that board, and quite frankly, we're not interested in this point in mediation or trying to settle differences. We can do that after we've separated, and we will work together. It's not going to be a Chinese wall between these valleys. We will work together and cooperatively wherever it makes sense to do so, but we want to represent ourselves. I've talked to any number of people in the valley who are, as emotionally invested in this as I might sound right now. We expect and hope that the commissioners will respect the vote that was taken by the people by a decisive majority, and all the requirements of the charter were fulfilled. So just repeating, we hope and expect the board will do its duty under the law and recognize it, because we did everything we were supposed to. And believe me, the people of our valley fully understood what they were voting for, and a decisive majority said we want to represent ourselves.
Okay. Thank you. Under time. I do have the stopwatch out now. Behind you, sir, anyone in this row coming across, would you like to speak? Anyone on this row liking to speak? Yes, please. And again, just your name and where you live.
So I'm Patty Wheeler, and my family's been in this valley for 46 years, between my father-in-law and my family and children. We live at Four Peaks Ranch, and so I didn't expect to speak today, and I'm not very good at this. But in April, I had a phone call from John McBride, and I couldn't pick John out in this room. I have no idea who he is. But I had a phone call and asked me to talk to him about the master plan. And they wanted to come to my house and have a meeting with me, just me. And I felt like that was inappropriate because who am I? I'm just one voice. So I don't know what that was all about, but I think that somehow or another, he suggested to me at that point that we break off, that we all have difference of opinions, and what we want for our property is different from what Capitol Creek wants for theirs. So I just leave you with that. I would like you to respect the vote, and that's my position.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tibor Stern, and I'm not a resident. I am a homeowner in the valley. And up until John Ely, right, respectfully notified me that I have a right to speak, I was led to believe by certain board member of the caucus, of the opposing the Capitol Creek caucus, that that's not my right, okay? My right is only to pay the taxes and not to speak up. And I will tell you the name of the board member in private, Madam Chair. I don't want any feuds here. As such, I did not prepare my speech, okay? But I can tell you, I own the house. It's an almost 40-acre ranch for 13 years. I begged to be on the list of the caucus members, begged, and I'm going to tell you who was the board member that I begged to be on the email. And Chelsea, you put those...
Please, let's address the board and your comments on
right.
this item.
Okay,
Everybody.
no problem. Well, Chelsea said that she put on every electric pole and every stop sign about this master plan. Well, I did not see it. I did not receive it. I'm not here full time. And as such, I figure, well, they don't want you. You have no right to speak. You have not right to talk. So for 13 years, I begged to be on that mailing list. I'm still not on it because the same board member that told me whatever he told me, I said, well, you need to check that I'm on that list. And he came back to me finally after I pushed him. Yes, I checked, and you are not on that list. Back to only two important points here. Chelsea said that the board is elected democratically. Well, what democracy is this? This is anti-democracy. When you decide who's going to be the board member, please furnish an email to me that's saying there is an election.
30 seconds.
Okay, that's plenty for me. I don't need more. So, and then Mark said the last 3 months, the dispute is on only 3 months. No, this is going on in my books for 13 years. And this is not repairable. And please respect our vote. And Danube goes through 10 countries. Nile goes through from North Africa to South Africa. And Colorado River goes, all of those good states that they all coordinate and cooperate. I promise to you, we are environmentalists, and we will do the same.
Thank you. Okay. Coming across to the second row on the left-hand side, who would care to speak? Please come forward.
Hi, I'm John McBride. I'm on the caucus board. I'm one of 17 members. I've been on it off and on through the years. I've lived 36 years in the valley. A couple years ago, the county asked the board to update the master plan. I volunteered along with 5 other people to do that. We went diligently through all of the existing master plan and came up with a vastly simplified one It did initially not allow any TDRs in the valley, and after there was some expression of concern from people mostly up Snowmass Creek, we modified it to make it the same as it had been before in 2003. So fundamentally, we softened it. It's 10 pages instead of 36. It's directed to future residents and people who want to remodel. The old one was directed to the county commissioners. It was approved by the P&Z and the Community Development Office just before we modified it, and then we simplified it, and they approved that as well. So initially, this seemed to be a concern of a lot of people in the Snowmass Valley, Snowmass Creek Valley, but we responded to their concerns. I must say that when Jan talked to me and a couple others about their being upset, still continued to be emotionally upset, I did say, well, why don't you start your own caucus? I indeed thought it would follow the actual drainage of Snowmass Creek, which would have included Gateway and all the way down to Conoco as the Capitol Creek ends when it gets to Snowmass Creek. So I'm a bit miffed about the expanded area. And I guess there are not rules and regulations by the county defining a drainage similar to Maroon Creek and Castle Creek. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Anyone else on this road? Then we'll go right behind you. Molly, come forward.
I am Molly Child. I've lived on Capitol Creek since 1975. I served on the board for a total of 5 years, including right now. I care very deeply about the valley, and I've dug a lot of weeds and picked up a lot of trash, and our family's been involved since the very beginning of the caucus when my father-in-law worked with both members from both sides of the valley to form what they called the Mountain Valley Citizens Association, and they were together to work on common issues for both valleys. I feel that on the valley, the caucus has a lot stronger voice when they represent a broader spectrum of residents, including the plants and animals, which Mark spoke about. And many residents of both creeks support the TDR program, and our family has benefited from the TDR program. And I think that we can come together and find ways that are acceptable to all to keep that program going. But if we're going to allow homes of as large as 8,250, I feel like we might need more county guidance and a clearer policy to define ways to protect this last really beautiful rural valleys in the Roaring Fork Valley. And I really want to believe that the residents of both valleys agree on the basic goals and principles of our master plan. And I just hope that through mediation and resetting the master plan that we can achieve these goals to the satisfaction of everyone.
Hello, my name is Martha Ferguson. I am on the caucus board for the last 3 years. I've lived on Picket Pin Lane for 32 years, so I've lived a long time and my family's grown up there. I just wanted to point out a couple of things, one being the notification of people of the whole constituency in Old Snowmass. I've worked a little bit on helping and working with our webmaster who sends out the e-blasts, and I just want to comment, and this was what came back to me from our webmaster. I was concerned when Jan Martin came to one of our meetings and claimed, as she did just now, that she, for a year and a half, she never received any notifications of the master plan as we were studying it, making changes, etc. And that was alarming to me because that didn't seem right. So I contacted the webmaster and asked him to check, could you see if, specifically her and a few others who've also claimed they never received information, could you please double check and make sure that we have those correct emails so that they are receiving our e-blasts? And he came back to me and confirmed that she had, for the last 6 to 8 months, has received every single one, that they were all received, none of them bounced back, and he even was able to check and tell me that every one of them had been opened except one, which was an invitation to our recently held community picnic. So I would have to refute her claim that she hasn't received information. I think the information is out there and it has been received. Secondly, I would like to say to the gentleman, maybe he left already, we did put up signs. We had signs all over Old Snowmass to advertise our big July public hearing on the master plan. And 2 days later, they all disappeared. And no one knows who took them down or where they went. But we have had some incidences like that that are a little bit disturbing.
30 seconds.
Um,
I've got it.
That's it.
Okay.
I'm good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would perhaps want to remind everyone, as we heard from the very beginning of the meeting, we're not here to determine motivation. That's not one of the criteria of decision-making on our part. Let's see, anyone else on this row coming across? Third row back, anyone on the third row back? There we go. Thank you.
My name is Ingrid Antoni, and I live at 9,000 Snowmass Creek Road and have for the last 34 years. I've been in Pitkin County for 45 years or something. Anyway, I think that the complexity of the two valleys is very different, and I know that there is a lot of contingency between the board members and the people in my valley. John McBride suggested, after he and I had a heated discussion about the master plan, that he thought that it would be best if the two valleys separated into two separate caucuses. And as far as Sue Helm goes, I discussed this with her a number of times, and she said she wasn't interested in dealing with it, and that she was neutral on the subject.
Thank you. Third row back on the right. Anyone else care to speak? Who's here? Please come on forward. Thank you all for being respectful of time. This is worse moderating.
I'm Emily Smith, and I'm a non-resident owner. We've been here, this is our 11th summer. We are full-time taxpayers, however. I went on the board of the caucus, the Snowmass Creek Caucus, probably 10 years ago, 9 years ago, because of overreach and things that I was hearing about recommendations that were going to directly affect us as private property owners. Served on the board for quite some time. I watched, I enjoyed getting to know the various people on the board and working with them. I watched Jan Martin really thrust us forward in terms of the website and land use policies, and I want to thank her for that. I would disagree that our voice will be diminished by separating. I think our voice will be much louder. I think you'll have more people participating because we feel very strongly about our proposed Snowmass Creek caucus area. There are a number of people who have served on the board who are proponents of the separation. When I was on the board, I could call in from Florida and participate. I couldn't vote, but I could participate. I understand, and I may be mistaken, but I understand that the new bylaws won't allow any call-ins for people out of town, which I think is very unfortunate. We will not be limiting Capitol Creek folks in any way. They can continue the great work they're doing. We don't intend to be an obstacle to their efforts. We intend to cooperate when it's feasible. We want to cooperate, but we really don't feel represented. And I think you can remember that that is exactly what this country was founded on. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're in the third row going across. Anyone else in the third row? If you've decided to speak, come forward. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll make this quick. I'm Marilyn Osier. I live in Shildo Terrace, and I'm not a political person at all, and I support this, and I realize that this vote is only to the board, to whether or not to have the caucus. Everyone has talked about the fish and the fair and the fauna, but I want to talk about property rights and the master plan, and I'm in favor of the split of the caucus, and that's all I have to say. But because it's about property rights, you can go on about the fish and the fauna, which we have supported through the years. I am not a board member, but I think that it's more important, and I know the board has done a great job in the valley with the 5,700 square feet and all that other good stuff, but property rights, if you want to tell us what kind of flowers we can plant or not plant, or that's one of the reasons I think that we're splitting, is property rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We have finished the third row here. We'll go back to the fourth row on the right-hand side. Anyone who cares to speak, please come forward. Thank you.
Hi, excuse me, Sheila Brennan, 5969 Snowmass Creek Road. I'm in favor of the separation, and I respectfully request that the board shall recognize the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Fourth row, here we go.
Hi, my name is Chris Collins. We own the McCabe Ranch, 70 McCabe Ranch Road. We're not in favor of splitting this up. I think this group has done a great job over the years. I disagree with a lot of the things in the master plan, as the Snowmass Creek people do, but I think that we're much stronger as a one group. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, fourth row on the left-hand side. Would anyone care to speak on the fourth row on the left-hand side?
My name is Gary Beck. I live at 2928 Snowmass Creek Road, and I have quite a large river frontage through my property. And because of that, you know, my father bought this property in the 80s and passed it on to me. I feel that my property is much more valuable with a strong river, with a river that has good stream flows, and because of that, I really believe that the current caucus has a much better policy for water. You know, my belief is that the new board, which I would be under, really doesn't have the same care for the water standards and for the creek and the inflow stream, and so I think it would affect my property values to break it up.
Okay. Thank you. Fourth row on the left-hand side. Anyone else, sir?
My name is Michael Vernon. I've been here since 1976. My wife and I own a home in Little Elk Creek, so we're in the Capitol Creek side, but we also own some property in Shildo Terrace. And I think this is about representation. I really do. I'm in favor of all the things the caucus has done with regard to wildfire, water protection and quality, protecting the environment. All these things are terrific. Our issues, to me anyways, is a land use code. You know, you're asking for guidance from the caucus about the land use code. In my experience with regard to the caucus's ability to handle that has been horrible, just horrible. You know, my personal experience, we asked for a activity envelope on our Shildo Terrace property, and Rob Sinclair came out and reviewed the property back in December of the past year. And he didn't reply either to the caucus or to us or to the community development department. And then my neighbor objected to the potential approval of this and brought the caucus into play. So with that, we went through an extensive review process, going to a hearing officer. The whole involvement was disgraceful with regard to fair treatment of our particular application. The caucus is ill-prepared to do this, and they continually do this with regard to land use issues. It cost me an additional $25,000 for their inability to deal with this application correctly. And I think that fair representation with regard to the new caucus and their approach, I hope to be involved with that. I'd like to be more, offer some guidance with regard to good suggestions about how we can do this effectively. But there's too few people within the caucus that sort of wield their own agenda, and that bothers me a lot. So I'm looking for separate representation. I'll still participate to some degree in the Capitol Creek side because I live there. But I think this is an important decision you need to make and allow Snowmass Creek to have their own representation.
Thank you. Additional in the left-hand side, left-hand row. Okay, we'll go, is there a back row on the left, just to be consistent? Okay, back row on the right, please come forward. We'll get there.
My name is Lynn Britvar, and I'm representing the Bunting family at 9376 and 9372 Snowmass Creek Road. And Mr. Bunting asked me to come here today and say that he was very much in favor for separation. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We'll now go, is there anyone else in the in the seats? We'll go to the back row. Ma'am, if you'd like to come forward.
So the last time I was in front of you guys, I think I was crying on behalf of my neighbor in Shieldo. I promise I won't cry today.
Okay.
My name is Sally Schatz, and I first lived in Old Snowmass in 1989, and we're a quirky bunch. I think we all like living out there because we have that kind of space around us, and kind of feel at home with that. I purchased a place out there, and it was my full-time residence for 17 years. Due to unfortunate situations, I had to level my house and throw away all my possessions because of the home. I'm now reestablishing my home, and I'm grateful to the caucus when I put in my application that they were supportive. I was heavily involved with the caucus in the 90s, and I always understood that what you put into it, you got out of it. And I understood there were personalities, some that had been there a long time, some that had not been there a long time. I think the power of the two valleys is together. And I look back on all the accomplishments and what they have succeeded in doing. And I think of the personalities. And I guess my greatest fear in separating is, how are we going to heal this rift that is just in this room alone, there's so much anger. And I think it'd be much better if we learned how to work together. I also know a lot of people, I never received any information about the separation of the caucus. I received a request about a letter about the TDRs, which I responded to. I never received any other information other than we're having a vote, and I started calling around and trying to find out what it was about. And I do check my email, and I do check my mail and read it. So I think the power would be to hold this together. I do know a lot of people weren't able to make that vote, and I had to leave a mountain rescue meeting where we were debriefing rescues in order to get there, which I would rather have been on that. So I hope you guys hold us together and make us work out our differences and get along and be stronger because of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments across the back row? If there are none, then I will call for anyone who has changed their mind and decided to speak now. Ma'am, please, and then we'll see if there's any others, and then we're going to close that public section off.
Thank you. My name is Anna Fura, and I'm a full-time resident. I live here, I work here. I'm a newbie. I've only been in the Valley for about 10 years, but this is my home, and I love it. I know the caucus very well because when I moved into my neighborhood, I wanted to be involved, and I was involved. I think people are great. They're doing a great job. I don't think that is the question. I think the differences that are in this room are to do with very few individuals, and that is sad. If people want to be represented and their voices heard, it is not up to a couple of individuals that want to keep together. We are together. There is no separation, but there is a representation, there is opinions, and there is something that intelligent people want to be heard, and they want to be heard in a certain way. And I think that is important. So I would please ask you to grant this separation because it's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has not yet spoken who would like to speak? Kathy DeWolf, please.
My name is Kathy DeWolf, and I live on Snowmass Creek Road. I feel really saddened to see this event happen. I had started, I think, back a few months ago protesting a TDR issue because of a client who brought it to my attention, and I had no idea this was going to morph into this, I call it an ugly divorce. That was not my intent. I was just trying to be heard on an issue that I felt was very important. And the TDR issue was brought to light because we had heard that the caucus was voting on it, and we were told at the time only one person was opposed to it. So we thought, well, we better write a letter and let everybody know what's going on, because there's something wrong with that. So I think it's, since this has all happened, I've met a lot of interesting, wonderful people. I've worked with both valleys a lot on this, and what impressed me the most was the dedication and interest on the people on the Snowmass Creek side. They're really a lot of ranchers who've been there forever, who have been there since the 1800s, who felt that they didn't have a voice, and who felt that in some ways the caucus was not looking out for their best interests, not only with the TDR issue, but with other issues as well. And I would just hate to see, from what I can see, I'm not sure a reconciliation would ever happen because of the population being outnumbered on the Snowmass Creek side. I think there's just not enough people there. And I think they're willing to put the work into it. They're very smart, capable people. I think it's not the place not the place of the current caucus to deny them their right to be represented. And by the way, I'm still a member of the old caucus. I'm not even in the new boundary. So I see both sides, but I think they have the right, and it should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no one else, I will, okay, ma'am. And this is going to be the last call unless I see that hand right now. Okay, please.
My name's Christina Krakowitz. I live in Upper Gateway. I've been here for 25 years. My feeling is that I'm hopeful that both sides can come together and work it out. I feel it would be a grave mistake to weaken the caucus as it is on future issues, and that I'm hopeful that we can come together and work it out.
Thank you. Thank you all. We're going to bring this back to the board for questions of ourselves, our attorney, comments. Patty.
Yeah, I just have a question as far as procedure from here. Today is a special meeting. We called a special meeting. We could vote in a special meeting. Yeah, but we are choosing, I believe, help me with this, guys, to move it to a first reading tomorrow, and then depending upon our discussion as a board tomorrow, we don't do public comment at first readings. We could, but we're not going to.
That's why we allow public comment tonight.
So the plan would then be to move it to a second reading if the board chooses. The board technically tomorrow could make a decision. Is that?
It's a two-reading resolution that needs to be approved by the board.
So we'd have to go to the 14th. Okay. Okay. That's all I needed. That's my question right now.
And if
John?
I could just add in for the audience's sake, one of the reasons we set this up this way was to do a work session where we would take public comment, because we had received notification that many people who wanted to speak would not be able to be at that second reading public hearing. And so we wanted to provide the opportunity to do this work session when we knew people would be here or be available to speak. We'll also have public hearing again on the second reading if there's additional comments that need to be made.
That's on the 14th.
On the 14th.
Just so the public knew what the next steps process was.
Thank you.
Could you, I don't actually understand, so could you clarify that? You're not going to vote today? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I said no, my question was, can we vote today? I didn't say we're not. I said we can vote today because we did call a special meeting.
Are we going to vote today?
I don't know, it's up to the...
Just for everyone's clarity, we had originally set this up as a work session. Because it's a quasi-judicial matter, we had to do it in a special meeting so we could take public comment. The way we've set it up is first reading at the regular meeting tomorrow and second reading on the 14th, which would be another public hearing. If the board so chooses, because you are in a special meeting, you could choose to take that first action today. It would still remain a 2-reading item, so we'd still have to have a second reading and public hearing.
At a certain space, or would the second reading be tomorrow?
No,
First reading would be tomorrow.
The second reading would be in September, because the second reading needs to be noticed 10 days in advance of the hearing.
So it gives the board an opportunity, if they'd like to sleep on this and discuss it more thoroughly tomorrow during our regular meeting at first reading, or if people have sentiments that they would like to get out. And I mean, certainly we have the audience here now to address comments if people have reached a conclusion. Michael.
John, this is a fairly loose, at least from my point of view, requirements. The only real requirement is stated in here that we should, information campaign shall be conducted to ensure that all qualified electors and non-resident real property owners in the proposed caucus area know the date, time, place, and purpose of the meeting. There seems to be some disagreement on that issue. So how exact does it have to be? It says ensure that all. What does that mean?
Ensuring that all qualified electors, non-resident property owners, are aware of the formation meeting, in my mind and in my opinion, cannot be interpreted to require actual notice. In other words, a hand delivery or a physical confirmation of everyone who is eligible to participate at that meeting in a vote. It simply would make the formation of caucuses too difficult and would be at odds with the general scheme, the desires of the electorate that established this provision in the charter in the first instance. So the requirement is not specified as to how that notification should take place, and is left to the board to interpret whether or not it is done or was done in a way that reasonably would ensure that everyone who could participate knew of the meeting so that they could participate in person. So it requires the board to evaluate those processes. If the board feels that the steps that were taken were sufficient, that they were reasonable and were consistent with the requirement that anyone who could participate would know of the meeting, in other words, a reasonable level of notice, then I think the board can reasonably find that the meeting was adequately noticed for the vote that was taking place. To read otherwise really does create a difficult, if not impossible, bar on the formation of caucuses.
So why doesn't it say a reasonable effort instead of to ensure all?
Good question.
George.
So just to follow up on that, for a reasonable effort, so when we do a public notice for land use, how much notice do we usually give, or are we required to give?
Typically speaking, we require a posting on the property being affected by the proposed development. We require a mailed notice to the surrounding property owners, and then we require publication of a notice of a meeting to entertain an action in a newspaper. We use the Aspen Times.
But what's the time frame? 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, in terms of notification having to be posted?
It depends on the particular action. For this action, it's 10 days, this resolution of the BOCC.
10 days.
I think that going back to what happened with Castle Creek, Maroon Creek, there was one affected party who apparently came forward and said they were not noticed. And so we sent it back to the formation group for the Maroon Creek Caucus to make sure that there was notification. I'm not saying that's necessarily what we need to do here. I'm just bringing the similarity. So we went back on that one and said you need to go back to that person. I believe we've had people here today who have said, we have to believe what people say, that they were not noticed or did not receive timely notification. And I just want to make that point. So does the board want to then do the same thing we did with the Maroon Creek Caucus and say, we need to go, I hate to do this, but go back around because there are people here who truly believe that they did not receive adequate notification.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and just to follow up, again, that was my question, because at least what I heard was that notices were given 7 days prior for the election. And so that also seems to be a little short. If you're out of town, if you didn't check your email, if you didn't check your post office, you may have missed that opportunity. And that's why I question our attorney in terms of how much time we normally give notices for land use to help ensure that neighbors will know that there is a land action being discussed.
It doesn't say here, though, that there's any specified time.
Right. It's just as reasonable, right? But I'm going to say reasonable, that was your point.
You know, this really goes right back to what I started the meeting with. The charter requirements on caucus formation, caucus details are incredibly sparse. They're left kind of with a good neighbor, good sense. What does the board feel? I think there were some real differences with the Castle Maroon situation, particularly that they were forming a caucus out of a very small area with a very limited number of residents and one primary property owner at the end of the road that they knew of that they had not noticed, that they were including. I mean, I'm talking one. That seemed almost a deliberate oversight, if it were. I have to tell you, I'm sitting up here feeling a little bit like Judge Judy in a nasty divorce, and it's not nice. This is like watching friends divorce. And, it's one thing you could look back and say, boy, we bought that great house together, and we had those great kids together, and they're all in college now, and, we have this business we have to sell and split. But people do grow apart, and I don't feel like I should have the role of being a pastor or marriage counselor and saying, you guys have to work together somehow, you have to work it out. And I'm clearly giving my perspective on this, but we're a member of the organization Colorado Counties, Inc., and we're part of an informal, small, progressive counties caucus. And we've had to start questioning, should we be paying our dues, $25,000 a year, plus other commitments, to an organization where we are consistently outvoted and we will never obtain a majority. They're one vote per county, and there's an awful lot of red counties out on the Eastern Plains, so that we recently asked them to oppose the transfer of federal lands to the states, and the organization wouldn't do that. And that's our national forest, that's our recreation, that's our economy. And it starts to become, should I be a member and continue in goodwill and collaboration, and there's bills we get passed and things that we do together, but which fundamentally won't represent our best interests as a county. And so I find this as very similar to that. I don't mind us sleeping on it and finishing discussions tomorrow. We do have a rest of an agenda, and we've gone a half hour, almost 45 minutes into that. But we are not here to make a determination on motivation. We're not here to make a determination on whether the caucus would be stronger or weaker if it's split. Those just are not criteria within the charter. The idea of reasonable notice, and I'm just laying out potential courses here for everyone to consider. Should we say no, we're not going to accept this as a reasonable outreach effort, or that the vote should have included more people. You know, to me, that would literally mean delaying acceptance of the Snowmass Capitol Creek Master Plan until next summer, when the residents who are here part year are back and able to vote again. And you'd have to redo the vote. Now, I'm saying sometimes that happens, and sometimes that could happen. But I just can't imagine invalidating it and then saying that, by the way, you're going to be living under a master plan which you did not agree with or did not support on your side, that was imposed on you as again, a permanent minority in population. That is a potential course. The other potential, literally, is that the Snowmass caucus could be formed, and someone could present a resolution on the first day to say, I'd like to see our caucus rejoin the other caucus, and that could be voted by a majority of the new caucus and rejoined. These are messy patterns, you know. I mean, it could happen. It just, nothing would say that it's permanent, or that if there is a true majority within the new caucus that does not like its formation, does not like where it's going, that they could either proceed to try to dissolve and rejoin, or just dissolve. Those are things that the citizens have within their own hands and their own powers, and that's where, again, we're being asked to be arbiters of a bad separation. George.
Question. I see our comm dev staff in the back. Has the Snowmass Capitol Master Plan been approved by the P&Z? What's the process and the status of that?
Will you please come forward to microphone, Cindy?
Cindy Human, Community Development Director, and the way we were running the master plan process up until we had our joint meeting with the P&Z and the board was that we were just bringing the master plan drafts forward to the P&Z for review. So the master plan that's been presented has gone to the P&Z for review. The P&Z has said, we like your master plan. There were a couple revisions, but they were all going to be adopted formally together at once. Since the meeting with the board and the P&Z, that process has changed. So we'll have to bring back this master plan separately. But the way I see it is, if the caucuses do split, there is an opportunity for two separate master plans.
Okay. And if we were kind of to, what I would call, suspend this process and ask for a do-over, would it be appropriate for us to say, okay, we're going to have to wait and see what master plan covers both areas?
It's up to the P&Z how they want to proceed with a master plan, but if in fact the board approves separate caucuses, I would think that the P&Z would want to see a separate master plan for the each side of the area.
Thank you. Well, again, to my board members, would you like to, anyone want to try a motion or have a vote today, or would you like to wait for this discussion tomorrow and have some time to gather your thoughts? It's clearly a weighty issue.
I'd make a motion to accept the Snowmass caucus.
Okay. Is there a second? I will second for discussion. Michael.
Yeah, it's not something I'd like to see, but it seems to me that our hands are tied. There's a very loose definition of what constitutes a caucus and what the criteria are for it. Essentially, it's come forward and ask for a caucus and give notice in your area. So it could be 3 people. Unfortunately, it's splitting up what I think is a good caucus, but that's what people want. So they're following the rules. We have an obligation to uphold those rules. So I would suggest to you to vote in favor of the Snowmass caucus.
Yeah, Patty?
I'm not necessarily saying I'm opposed to allowing the separation. I just go back to the concern about the people that have spoken that said, for whatever reason, I don't care if it's 1 person or 5 or 25. If somebody says that they believe they should have been notified and had the right to participate, We're talking about it.
Pardon me, ma'am. Pardon me. Pardon me, that is not appropriate.
Not given adequate time and he voted.
That is inappropriate.
I'm not the only person that's inappropriate here today.
See, these are the reasons that our decisions are so difficult, when people don't allow us as the elected officials the opportunity to express our concerns and try and come up with a fair and democratic process, which is what I'm trying to do. I am not saying no to allowing you to separate if you so choose. I'm just saying at this time I have concerns about everybody on both sides being notified of this separation. What about the people who live on the fringe, who don't want to be in Snowmass, who are forced to be in Snowmass, how are you guys going to get along on either side when we don't really know if everybody on either side has had the right to at least get notified and say, I don't want to be involved, or get notified and speak up? That's my concern right now, sitting here right now.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion, George?
It reminds me a little bit of like Brexit.
Yeah.
It's sort of a joke, but not really a joke, because there was a vote with sort of a slanted side of information being given, really not enough discussion, not a lot of people really understanding what they were voting for, and now they're starting to have sort of rethink that in terms of what are the consequences. And so I understand that there is a decision and a want and a need to have one's own caucus area to try to plan their own future. And I also have heard that it doesn't seem, at least from the proponents of the caucus, that they're really in any mood for any further talk in terms of trying to mediate and come up with a solution that would appease all the residents. To Patty's point, is it's hard for me to think about starting a new caucus when you have people within that caucus area that are voted against it. I mean, you're not starting off on a good foot. In the case with the Maroon Creek caucus, once it went back to those individuals that had not been notified and they were included in that discussion, it was unanimous. There was no opposition. So that group has been able to coalesce around their own concerns and move forward. You have a case here where some of your caucus members in the Valley are not in agreement. And I find that a little troubling. I think it's going to not be an easy way to start a new caucus. I would like to see, or I would like to suggest, that you give it one more shot. You have a mediator. No. I'm not asking for your input.
Folks, please, can we not do that?
And if you continue, I'll ask you to clear the room.
Continue.
Representation is very important. And I understand with the population differential between the Capitol Creek Valley and the Snowmass Creek Valley, it seems to me that there are opportunities to reform a board that has equal representation. That's one idea. Another idea is there's an opportunity to look at, when you do a vote on a master plan or any other issues, to use a supermajority. Again, try to address the representation. I think there's opportunities to look at a master planning by using some of these new ideas. And it may not go anywhere, and that's fine. If it doesn't go anywhere, that's great. But I would suggest that you give it a shot. One of the problems with the master plan that I saw from the initial start was that you didn't utilize staff early on to help facilitate that process. Most of the other caucuses use staff to help facilitate going through some very difficult decisions as each caucus upgraded their master plan. Snowmass Cap decided not to go that route, and I think that caused some of the some of the problems, some of the mistrust, some of the lack of communication. You didn't utilize all the resources you could have used to help move that forward and help communicate a little better. So those are my thoughts.
Again, let me reiterate, I'm not saying I'm against the separation. I would just like to see the process a little more thorough. I know you don't want to go back, you don't want to have to go over it again, but I feel you would be better represented in splitting, if that's the direction that it ends up, than in not making that effort. I'm trying to do that to facilitate and help. I know everybody's anxious to get the divorce over with, but sometimes divorce will be cleaner in the end, or maybe, God willing, and the creeks do rise, the divorce won't have to happen at the end.
Yeah. John, let me ask you, Ely, would it be possible, and I don't know how, to track down the email list that these notices went to, and or the mailing list that went to, so that the board could consider that at tomorrow's meeting?
Well, to the extent that they exist, I don't have those in my possession, so I believe
Would the proponents of the split have that?
This is on the 5th notice that was sent out to all the residents. Some of them went through their homeowners association because that is the procedure. Shieldo Terrace, for
And Jan, I'm sorry,
example.
Jan, you're not on the microphone. I have to ask you to repeat that. None of us like this temporary room.
This is the 5th notice that went out. Again, I reiterated, 3 went out from the existing caucus to their email list, plus a government mailing to the people of the residents of the 2 valleys. This went out, these are the emails that went out for the 5th notice, and there are 97 emails on this. As I mentioned, there's 123 residences. The reason there's not 123 is because Shieldo Terrace, their procedure is that you go through Kevin Michelson, who is the gatekeeper for that subdivision, and he sends out the notices to those people. Shieldo Mesa has a road association.
Victor.
Dee Dee Gurdon sends those out. Those are all in your packet. And so, again, this 5th notice is not in there, but I'll be happy to give this.
If you could give that to them for the record, that'd be helpful.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, we're not really here to offer good advice. We're perfectly capable of doing it. I can give advice all day long. What we're here for is because there's been a request to form a caucus. And as John said, the effort has to be reasonable. I think it sounds like it's a reasonable request, sounds like a reasonable thing. And it also sounds reasonable that if one person didn't get notice, it can't crash the whole affair. That's just part of the public process. The citizen can arm himself with information. That's his only defense. But we can't grind the system to a halt because somebody didn't see the sign, somebody didn't get the mail, somebody didn't open up. So all I'm saying is, to go back, our purpose here is to create, by request, a new caucus.
George, and then Pat.
I don't see that there's anything missing from that request. Period.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only comment I would say, Michael, is there are times when we've had neighbors come in dispute for land use issues, and we've suggested recommendations for them to go back, discuss, and come back to us. And many times they've been successful in reaching solutions on their own once they've been given that opportunity and some ideas.
Yeah, I agree, but it's under different circumstances, George. And this is a more clear-cut issue.
Patty, you're next.
Yeah, again, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that I want to make sure that we are doing the best job we can do to make sure that all of the affected parties have the opportunity to be part of this decision. I mean, that's what this democratic society is about. I know, Jan, you've done a huge effort, but I just think that we are hearing in some, we've got a packet that's huge of people.
And Patty, how would you like a revote to occur? Next summer, when everyone's back?
Well, it's really up to them as to how they can better disseminate the material, and if we have a list, I don't know how we can prove, but...
It has to be a vote in person, and you have a lot of part-year residents, so you would like to delay
Well, it would have to take time. It's not, my problem is not that people don't live here, it's that we need to be able to facilitate participation from all sides of the issue.
Let's keep the conversations down, please.
Yeah, I just think we need to come up with a process that will facilitate the involvement of all sides.
Yeah.
But this board can choose right.
Yeah, excuse me, folks. We are having our discussion now. Thank you. I'm going to weigh in now, and I feel as torn as I believe George and Patty feel, and I would acknowledge the great work that this caucus has done over time, but it really doesn't. And I'll fess up. I live in Aspen. I don't live in a caucus area, so it's a little different. We have the city is my caucus. But this dialogue, this discussion, this history doesn't seem to be what a caucus is supposed to be. It doesn't seem like inclusive conversations that involve neighbors. It doesn't seem. It seemed to be more about control and limitation. And, you know, it's unfortunate that things like that can erode trust and erode the respect for the work that's been done together. I agree with Michael. I agree that, and we don't agree all the time, but that there are some very thin requirements that we are supposed to decide upon. And I can't see expanding those again, in a marriage counselor role of telling people who don't want to talk to each other or who don't agree or who have had fixed positions on various issues that they have to work it out more, because I just don't know that there is a, as people have said, the TDR was only part of it. Allowing special review for marijuana licenses was another issue of concern. And if we talk about how do you make sure everybody hears and knows about an application in front of the board in the middle of December, that would be very hard for a caucus to try to get all their members involved in that. And if they haven't liked the idea of special review for marijuana growing, that's a distinct difference from TDRs. And on the TDRs, I'll just be clear, I said to our staff when they said let's update the master plans, that I do not want to see any master plans that come in that say we want to send our impacts into other parts of the county, but we won't take any impacts here. And I just can't see a TDR program working where some people get to be sending areas only and they're not receiving areas. It's just not how the TDR system has worked. And I have said that I would not follow guidance along those areas. It's just, you can't be beneficiaries of county program to reduce density and move density to more appropriate areas and then say, but by the way, we don't have any appropriate areas in our zone. That's of an issue. And so again, I'm just seeing a long history from many letters and our packets and our information of where differences of opinions in the minority are not respected enough that you get to this is a severe reaction. This isn't one dispute. This isn't one bad conversation type of movement. It happens when things are close to what we call irreconcilable differences in a divorce court. And if there's any way, in my mind, for the parties to reconcile, it's going to be when they both feel empowered to be able to have conversations together about what can we do jointly and work on together now that we're truly equal partners, not that we're not equal partners. And so I would be a vote with Michael to go ahead and acknowledge and recognize this based on the criteria in our codes. Patty?
Okay, problem is, looks like it's a 2-2, that would be a no, so the issue would not move forward, correct? That is correct. So I think it's best if we don't vote today. If we withdraw the motion. Can we do that, John? Because if we vote right now, it's going to fail. And I'm not necessarily sure I want it to fail. Rachel, you're going back to the issue is not okay, here's a better question. Why does Capitol Creekside not want to separate? Wait. I mean, that's of interest to me because do they believe that there could be the unity again? That's the feeling that I'm getting from hearing it today. That's what I'm feeling from today. I know there's animosity on both sides, but for some reason, Capitol Creek's not saying bye, see ya. And so that is of concern to me. And if we vote right now, my feeling is that George and I will stand on one side, Rachel and Michael will stand on another. That's a no vote. Therefore, your issue fails. So I would like to continue this, for at least give me some more time to maybe come up with a plan to solve this problem by tomorrow. We're on a time frame now. If we vote now, it's done and you've lost. So hopefully that'll appease some of the people who are really pissed off at me right now.
Michael?
Well, you know, we're not here to solve it. We're here to listen to the request from this caucus area. And they've met, at least they've done a reasonable job. I think we can all say that. Reasonable job of a caucus formation. So that's what's in front of us. It's not here to solve their differences. That's not going to happen. I mean, at least in this setting. So, but I would suggest that we look at the Home Rule Charter and revise this very weak. It's only weak really in terms of it was used to encourage the democratic process within the county, which it has. But it's gotten to a mature stage now, mature enough for these kind of arguments to break out, that we need to relook at it and make sure that we can have a stable caucus system. Because what I would be most afraid of is further division and division and division, and the caucus system would not really be of worth to anybody. And it is of great worth the way it stands now. So what we have in front of us is, have they met the criteria of Article 4? I would suggest to you that they have, and therefore we should let them form a new caucus. There's no other matter in front of us.
George?
I originally suggested that we have a work session, just to start this discussion, and to hear from all the public that have come here and provided your input. I want to acknowledge and thank you all. And we've heard many different opinions and different sides, almost to the point where the vote was, which was about 60-40. And I think it's been about 60-40 or close enough in terms of different comments. And so I think it's been a productive work session. If we make a decision now, it may prevent any opportunities to move forward. I would, again, and I think it is our responsibility, and one of our roles is to provide some input and to provide some suggestions. They may not be taken, and that's all right. But I would suggest that the leaders of the opposition and those who are the proponents get together, see if there's any opportunity, any ability to sit down with a mediator. It hasn't been done. Have you had a mediator? No, you have not had a mediator. Okay. Hold it.
You asked the question.
I asked a question. I'm sorry. Okay. So you haven't had a mediator. So to Rachel's point in terms of an ugly divorce, well, you don't just split up. You have counseling. You do the best you can, and at the end, if that's a decision to split, you split. But you make every best effort to try to work differences out. So I'm suggesting you try that, because otherwise you may not get what you want.
Okay.
I'm suggesting we withdraw this motion We have a meeting tomorrow. Give me time to digest it, because if we vote right now, it does not look like your issue is going to move forward, and I don't really want to do that at this point.
I will withdraw my second. It's a little quasi rules of Roberts. But I agree. I think it's better, as I suggested that before, we all get a chance to sleep on it tonight. But I'm very glad we had the discussion now, because we have a full agenda tomorrow as well, and we'll have at least gotten some main items out on the floor.
At least 3 hours out of the way.
Very, very clear to the public is that we have a first reading and a second reading. And the first reading, at least in my practice at the city and going forward, has generally been that you want to advance things on first reading so that you go to the public hearing and so that they get a fair reading. If you kill something on first reading, you never got to that point. So sometimes people will vote yes on first reading on something that they're not planning on voting yes on the second reading. My point in all this is that the second reading is in September 14th. And to George's point, that if there is some outreach and some discussion and can talk with a mediator and have that time period to see if it wants to go forward or not want to go forward, there is a month. There's a little less than a month for those sort of conversations to happen between first reading and second reading, between this meeting today and formal second reading. And there could be that attempt to see. I will say, I think people are stronger together. I think there's more opportunity for finding common ground and common goals. I'd like to see that. But I also, again, don't feel my role is as a marriage counselor. And but if that makes a difference, and that would make it easier, because we're going to come down to the same 4 people able to vote on September 14th. So I would strongly suggest that we do try to have some meetings together, maybe a little more than just the 2 principals that we've seen discussing this, and see if there's anything that can be done. But it is a long process. It's a democratic process, and that is how we're going to proceed. We're going to have first reading on this tomorrow, and then we would have second reading, and nothing would become finalized one way or the other until the second reading in September.
That's what I wanted to say, just so the public knows. If we voted to support this today, it would still have to go to the second reading on the 14th. So right now, as of the discussion we've just had, we're not delaying anything yet.
Yeah.
And we may not choose. Tomorrow we will see where we go. It either moves on to the second reading or it fails tomorrow. So
okay.
She's the boss.
Thank you. Michael?
So, John, Rachel stated that she withdrew her second. What's the effect of that?
Motion dies.
Well, typically, once the motion is seconded, it falls to the maker of the motion to withdraw. However, if the board recognizes that without a second, that the motion won't be called, then we can move forward to tomorrow.
Well, I thought that a motion you could only withdraw your second if I had changed my motion. And I had not changed my motion.
I will offer a substitute motion to not vote on this item today and hold our first vote on it tomorrow. Will anyone second my substitute motion? Okay. So now we have a vote on this.
Table. We just move it forward.
Tabling motion takes priority.
Yeah. Okay. So you're right to call me on procedure, Michael. I was just trying to shortcut it a little bit, but now there's a substitute motion that we will not vote on this today. All those in favor of the motion not to vote on this today, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone who would oppose? Nay. Thank you. We'll do a couple of really quick little conversations here because we're behind schedule. Chelsea has a
question. Are there public comments at a first reading, which is tomorrow?
No.
So the next time for public comment, should there be some, is the 14th of September.
Correct.
This is procedural.
Yes.
On the mic.
On the microphone, please.
Is there conversation allowed? In other words, it's been my understanding that we were not to speak with any of you, so we have not.
It still remains quasi-judicial.
Okay, so none of us should speak with any of you.
You can certainly send letters to the full board as long as they go to all of us. Okay. Any comments to all of us are welcome.
Letters are fine, no conversation.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. We will certainly entertain and appreciate additional comments. We're glad all of you were here to participate today. Again, sorry, it's something that's so emotional. Sue, you have one more question. Please come to the...
Additional comments, not for tomorrow, or will you take additional
Take
comments for
right
tomorrow?
up till September 14th, and we'll take additional comments into consideration in a written format tomorrow as well.
You will
Certainly.
tomorrow as well.
But not public hearing tomorrow.
No, there's no public hearing
I
tomorrow.
understand, but written comments, if we
Written
send them
comments that
tonight,
become
we'll
part of the
go.
public record.
And we read it all.
Patty Wheeler, you had another question?
Yeah, I just wanted to address, I just really wanted to address you, Patty, and saying, you're right. It's hard to understand why Capitol Creek would want to keep us together if it's so evenly divided. And so, but I asked the same thing back. Why would anyone want to force them to stay together? Period.
Okay, we're kind of getting back into public comments. I thought you had a procedural question.
no, I'm sorry.
That's okay, I understand. This is, and I'm not perfect either, guys. I'm sorry if I've chaired the meeting in a wrong way in any way. I encourage everyone to send additional comments to us who have thoughts that they'd like us to consider. Thank you very much, and we're going to take a 10-minute break, Grassroots. Thank you. Tuesday, August 23rd. You're watching the work session of the Board of County Commissioners, and we're now going to have an interview for a renewal of application for the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board, and that's Andre Willie. So, Andre, welcome. Thank you for being here today. Was it the second day of school for you?
Zoom down here after teaching busy classes of students about the chemistry, and we're going to go into water chemistry soon. So.
Ooh, that'll be exciting. Well, I want to just start this off by thanking you for your service on the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board. You know, this was a new board. You were one of the founding members, and I believe that it's really come a long way in finding its feet and defining its mission. And I particularly would thank you for your really thorough answers on the reevaluation form. You know, sometimes we just get a sentence or two at most, and really appreciated you putting the thought into that. So just in general, I'll ask you, why would you like to continue on the board?
Oh, I've really enjoyed working with this group of people and this board. It's been a great learning experience for me, and it's very rewarding. I was telling my wife the other day, I just felt it was really rewarding to work on some of these projects and to make some of the decisions. And mainly the decisions are quite easy. It's, you know, to fund really important projects, I think, and to decide which projects are the most warranted, and to hopefully stimulate more people to ask and come up with good ideas to help protect our rivers. So in that sense, I find it pretty neat. It's the best board I've ever served on. So it's great. I mean, it's different than, say, a nonprofit board or something else, because just the way it's set up and structured for funding. So that's been very rewarding and enjoyable. So I'm happy to put my hat in the ring again for, you know, another couple of years.
Well, that's appreciated. Patty, did I see your hand for a question? Or?
I was just eating chocolate.
Oh, okay, Steve.
Andre, thanks for reapplying. We do really appreciate having you on there. And I remember the expedition we took when we had the River Watch program.
That's right.
And I'm curious if you had anything like that with your students at Aspen High School.
That was a pretty unique thing. We went, and Steve came along with us. We mountain biked up to Lincoln Creek Reservoir and did water quality testing up there and bug analysis to look at the effect of the mine drainage. And it's funny you bring that up, because then last year, some of that work we did, which was 25 years ago, kind of came back to light when they did the release out of Ruby. And it was like, God, we were up there and we looked at all this, and we've kind of been following along over the years. So it's pretty neat that we did that, and I forgot that you would come along with that. It was cool. So today, right now, we don't do anything quite like that, where we actually go out and camp out in the field in a fairly remote, high-altitude location like that. Like, we got snowed on that trip, and it was pretty rugged, but we did get some good water quality data. But my students are going out all the time, monthly, getting samples from 3 different locations in the watershed, and so we do a lot of stuff with that, a little bit different than that particular trip. However, I would like to reinstitute something like that, because it really makes it memorable for the kids to go out and camp out and, you know, really be out in a wilderness setting, and then looking at environmental conditions, you know, here that at the head of the watershed, and you know, kind of seeing the big picture, I guess, and experiencing that. So it's a good program.
Very nice.
I want to just tag on to that, because maybe that would be something we could help with educational outreach stuff with Healthy Rivers and Streams, to try and maybe put some dollars into funding some kind of another program like that, and on a small scale or whatever, with local students, because we're always trying to get young people involved in our committees and commissions, and like we do with the Healthy Community Fund grant program, we have 2 student representatives that sit on that. So maybe not asking them to sit on the Healthy Rivers and Streams, because there's a lot of information that's there, but maybe doing a little sidebar program that then they could come back and present to the Board of Commissioners along with Healthy Rivers and Stream Board. So maybe that's something we can think about with.
It'd be really neat.
Yeah, with your participation on the board for the next couple of years.
There is an experiential ed trip going out next week that is focused on Western water issues.
Yeah.
And they go out and tour some of the Trans Mountain diversions and go over to Twin Lakes and look at the tunnel and look at some of the issues. And so there's definitely a place for that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Great having you back.
Andre, thanks for replying. You guys had a retreat this past year, and you came up with, I don't remember if we ever got updated on what some of your upcoming, what some of your goals were for this
the most
coming year.
recent retreat we did was really working with the Roaring Fork leadership and trying to look at our board and how to improve our board function, and kind of taking a close look at that. And so it was not so much looking at our long-term goals of the board, although we've looked at that, but it was the most recent meeting like that was more improving board relations and how to maximize each of our roles on the board by kind of looking at the characteristics of the individuals. I think you guys have gone through that, the Roaring Fork leadership with Andrea Palm Porter, and similar to that, I think.
All right, thanks.
Andre, thank you for your service. One thing, I mean, talking about a global picture, what I would love is that if your board could interest Eagle County and Garfield County in establishing similar boards, since we're all in the same watershed, it'd be an enormously powerful coalition, and at least make a presentation to those boards of commissioners about your experiences on the board and your achievements. And I just think it would be fabulous. It's with a tenth of a penny of sales tax that enables you guys to do your work, and a tenth of a penny in Garfield County or Eagle County would be phenomenal. So it would fund all kinds of things. So I hope you'll think of that in the future.
That would be great. I mean, one of the things we're always looking at is the replicability of the things that we're doing with Pickens County Healthy Rivers and how this could be carried out in other locations. So we kind of see some of the work that we do as a model for others, but there aren't any others really quite like us out there that have funds that are dedicated. And I think you're right, we need to be a little more aggressive. The other counties in the state haven't tried to model this. They haven't followed our lead here, and so maybe we need to be a little more aggressive in going to them and saying, hey, this is really a great thing. So I hear that. I'd be happy to bring it up with our board and talk about that. But we do really want to serve as a model for this kind of thing in other locations.
Okay.
Great. Anybody else have any questions? Well, again, I would just thank you for the service, and I'm going to go to Water Congress for Thursday and Friday, and just came back from the IBCC meeting last week, and they always use the expression water time because projects that you do in water take so very long, and so people will think that things move very, very slowly in water time, but in that sense, in that lens, things have moved very quickly during your time and our time. The acquisition of the RISD and the ongoing efforts to construct the water park, that's going to be huge for our river, our future. The battle over extinguishing the rights on the Crystal River, multiple other efforts have gone forward, and even I know our water trust with the CWCB didn't particularly produce the fruit we wanted it to. That board changed a little bit in terms of really installing the stream gauges and things like that. It's also, oddly enough, being used as a model for other communities of how to work along those lines. And the one thing I've been really thinking about a little for your board to consider, it may be as challenging as getting Garfield to take that sort of interest, but especially given the city's consideration of their diligence filing going forward, it's like getting rid of the city's rights doesn't do anything to protect the river. It's then available just for someone else to market or someone else to lay claim to a new conditional rights on. And so the real issue is, well, perhaps if the city kept that for another 6 years, did their diligence, and in the meanwhile began a really serious, long-term, multi-year legislative effort to create some new beneficial water rights along the lines of compact assurance flow, that some flow from these small streams in the West Slope should not be subject to appropriation because we need to ensure it to make our compact commitments to Lake Powell. And, it's challenging because the Front Range wants to divert everything, but on the other hand, they know full well their plumbing is connected to the compact of Lake Powell. And so I'd love to see the firepower of a city like Aspen working towards that goal so that they would have someplace safe to maybe deposit those rights in the future. And maybe that would be a way even to deal with some issues we've seen on the Crystal without going the full wild and scenic route that other people are concerned with. So there's still a lot of work to be done. It's a nice way of saying that.
Yep.
Yeah, so we appreciate you being there and putting your shoulder to the wheel.
We can come up with some creative solutions to some of these things. But we've got a lot of brain power working on it.
Hey, you got good brain power. Yeah.
We could use more, but.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And we'll have to check in. Do we have any other, I see Lisa in the back, we don't have any other applicants for this district seat, and we can discuss it later, and we'll let you know as soon as we have a chance to discuss.
All right, great.
Okay, thanks, Andre.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
You bet.
Okay, and then we're going to be jumping around on this agenda a little bit because we went so long on that last one. I'm sorry, but it really deserved a full hearing. Let's go to the letter of support for the GOCO grant with Gary Tenenbaum.
Hello all. I'm Gary Tenenbaum with Pickens County Open Space and Trails, and this is kind of a heads up of what's on your agenda tomorrow. As everyone knows, the Crystal Trail, the Carbondale to Crested Butte Trail, was put on the governor's 16 trails for 2016 list. It's part of his Great Colorado the Beautiful project, and it's an initiative that really resonates with our valley and what we found out with every other valley and town in Colorado is trying to connect every resident to have a trail within 10 minutes of their house. And it's a really impressive long-term vision that we're trying to seek. When they did this, there was no funding attached to a lot of these things. So we got this, this great recognition that this trail is a critical need, but how are we going to fund it all? So the great thing is GOCO has been working with the State Department to figure out how to help fund these projects. And they are doing what they call a Connect Initiative grant. And the Connect Initiative grant this round is for trail planning. And this is perfect for the Crystal Trail and the Carbondale Crested Butte Trail since, we're not really ready to construct tomorrow. We have a long way to go. We've got to really see the feasibility of alignments. We need to, do a very large public outreach program, and we also need to do a huge environmental analysis. We've got to work with many different county governments and local governments and state governments and federal governments to really come together on what are the feasible options for if we can make this trail a reality sometime in the future. So what is on your agenda tomorrow is a resolution to support a GOCO grant for $400,000. It would be a $200,000 match from Pickens County, and it would include surveys of the CDOT right-of-way where we need it. It would include all of the environmental analysis. It would include the engineering feasibility of different alternatives. And the reason why Pickens County is going to be the lead agency, is at least what we're proposing, is a lot of these costs are in Pickens County. The reality is if we want to continue the same type of trail that we have from the first 5 miles up to Redstone, it's a significant potential cost. And how do you do it? And we got to figure out all the concerns that the public have with wildlife, and we have to do a big public outreach program where in Gunnison and coming out of Crested Butte, they have worked with the federal government really well with the Forest Service to come up with conceptual alignments. Some of them are included already in their travel management plan. So they just need a little more NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, to make this happen. They still have, some alternative routes that they got to figure out. But in the long term, it's really our side. We've always knew that once we got some other projects done, we would return to this section of trail and really give it the time. And so, we want to work with the caucus and everybody else. This really gives us it helps us a ton with the funding to make this a reality.
Okay. Board
Thanks for the
questions?
update.
Michael?
Will this study go to the Picken County line or just up to Redstone?
This study will actually include and I'm happy you brought up the question, because one of the great things about partnering with Gunnison County and the town of Crested Butte is we're trying to figure out, we've gotten meetings together with the 3 forests. There's 3 different national forests that we have to deal with, the White River, and then you have the Gunnison, but they have 2 different ranger districts. And so this study actually will help look at all of them, because if we can do a joint NEPA project, it will save us all funding and it will save us all time. So no, it's to help plan the entire trail that hasn't been built from Carbondale to Crested Butte.
Whoa. Great.
Okay, and other board questions or comments? I just want to make sure the link with the caucus is really tight up there. That was expressed to us when we were having the meeting with the Gunnison County Commissioners as well, that, they don't want to hear later on, they want to be as involved as they can from early on and at least let you know what they've already scoped out as goals and priorities, so.
True. Oh, I mean, honestly, for us, the caucus has been calling us. The reality is we don't have any planning going on.
Well,
so
I understand that, but that's where they were saying we want to get in before any planning has started and at least let them know what we've already been thinking about before your department starts its planning. I mean, that was just very, very direct ask. And just given how it may or may not get a complete read in the paper after our discussions on it tomorrow, I'd like to make sure you've done that outreach to them to say, this will be happening. We're excited, and we know we're going to be including you.
I sent, just to give an update on that, I sent their caucus and Dee and Mark Hilberman and a lot of others the update of where we're at, and then we are going to get on their November caucus meeting to give them a presentation, because by that time we'll start to know. We won't know about the GOCO grant until December, but by that time we're already starting, a process timeline. So our goal is to make sure that this is completely transparent. And so the hardest part is when you don't have anything going on, they always think you have something going on. So we're trying to live in that little world right now, but I totally agree, and we will do that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Do we need any action on this today?
Will be tomorrow.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks. John, what would you like to do next?
We have waived off the facilities update, but we would like to do the telecommunications update next.
Okay, thank you.
I know you've all seen this. Kara Silvernagle in the manager's office. And
Drew Peterson with the communications team.
so just to give a little bit of background, we came before you guys in July, and after that meeting, realized with the amount of projects we have going on, and sorry, I'm just noticing this has animations in it. I didn't realize. Okay, I think that's all of them.
I had a few more.
But when we came to you guys, given the breadth of the projects that we're wrapping under telecommunications, with the dispatch, with the transition to the digital trunk to radio system, DTRS, our broadband initiative, as well as just updating all of our translator sites, we've talked and said we're going to try and start coming before you guys every 2 weeks, or at least right now, to kind of keep you guys in the loop of the breadth of projects that we're working on. So the first one today is kind of just overall where we are, and then once we start moving down the line in the next couple of weeks, Drew, who's been doing a great job managing all of our construction projects, can get more into the weeds, but just want to give you guys an overall today. So just a reminder, here's our fun diagram that I like to go back to, but it just shows how dispatch, and this is the design of really how all of our telecommunication infrastructure, so when I say telecommunications, I'm talking about public safety, broadband, and translator, TV, FM, are really what we're moving towards is something where it's all linked and that they're leveraged together for all three purposes, and that obviously right now the key piece is the dispatch center. That is really the cornerstone that's going to help us be a springboard. And so I'll hand it off to Drew, and he can kind of give you an update on the projects that we're working on and trying to get done before the snow falls, hopefully not tonight.
So first off, I'll start off with dispatch. I'm not the lead on that. That would be Jeff Kruger, but he's busy with meetings there. But everything is moving forward as scheduled.
Drew, if you could just introduce yourself and your position with the county. Okay, thank you.
I'm Drew Peterson. I work with the communications department as a communications project engineer. I work under Jeff Kruger, who's in charge of managing the dispatch building out in North 40. He's told me to report to you that everything's going on schedule. Everything is on plan to have a transition period in mid-September, the 19th, 20th, and 21st. And there's nothing big to report there. As far as our other sites that we're upgrading this fall, our big ones are at Loge, Williams, and Town of Snowmass Village. As you can see on this chart, Loge and Williams are both in that critical microwave loop that we're trying to fix. All of those sites, the priority is public safety and a microwave backhaul, plus future expansion for cellular and broadband. Right now, everything has been approved by FCC, FAA, Planning and Zoning Board, State Land Board, Town of Snowmass Village Board, and Town Council, the state, and the U.S. Forest Service, which at Loge, I believe you guys will be seeing the lease to be signed tomorrow at your meeting. All of the building permits have been submitted and under review, and all of our materials for our projects this year have been put on order. We have finalized all of our designs for our towers. So at Williams, we're building a 60-foot and a 40-foot tower, as we brought before you, and we are hoping to start construction shortly. We have a little bit of a delay on some of our materials and steel and a generator, but these delays shouldn't affect our overall schedule. We're looking to have everything done by the beginning of November at the latest to avoid the snowfall. Loge, we were up there today. We did a site tour with SKICO and an electrician to go through what kind of equipment and space we'll need in SKICO building. Everything's going well. And in Town of Snowmass Village, they have approved us for an excavation permit to start work on Thursday. So we'll be digging a hole and building the foundation for our tower that will go behind the Town of Snowmass Village Town Hall on Thursday. And then before you, we will bring an IGA for the board to review and approve between the Town of Snowmass and Pickens County, which will outline specifically that Town of Snowmass will allow us to build the tower. Pickens County will maintain and the equipment on site and build the site. And yeah, I think that's everything.
Patty?
All right, I'm going to throw one at you.
Yep.
What's going on at the North 40 right now? They're trenching. Is that part of our project or part of the fire department's project?
Or part of RAFTA
report?
Yeah. Jeff Kruger would be able to better answer those questions. To my knowledge, I think they might be laying fiber. Is that?
It's grounding.
It's grounding. It's grounding right now, yeah.
And is that any way connected with the excavation that's going on the other side at the intersection to the airport? John, you might know that one.
It is not related to the North 40.
I just noticed two activities going on when I was coming up Valley yesterday. Right. Thanks, didn't mean to put you on.
No, it's okay.
Like, what's going on over there?
Great.
Okay, great.
Michael?
How do you protect against lightning strikes in locations like mountaintops?
So we will actually have two grounding systems. One of them is called the UFR grounding system, which is where the tower is actually grounded just via metal cable to the rebar in the foundation. That's been just a proven since World War II foundation design that is effective for the majority of lightning strikes. Additionally, at all of our sites, we plan on inserting a chemical rod electrode that will also dissipate any lightning strike to protect it.
So there's no danger then of damage from a lightning strike if you have
there shouldn't be, no. It's possible, every once in a while something might break, but no major damage that would be critical to the site.
Good question.
Well, we appreciate the update. Tara, do you have any additional?
Yeah, so I was just going to follow up. So those are the current projects that we're working on. And then it's been a big learning curve, I think, for all of us, understanding the complexity of all of these sites. As you guys are aware, between IGAs with different government entities, building permits, NEPA permits, all that fun stuff. And so also the other piece that we're working on, and we're not sure about the timing, is with Aspen Water. So I'm helping Phyllis work with BLM and the city of Aspen because there's a little bit of complexity there between, it's a BLM property, city of Aspen, to create a communication site. So you'll probably see some stuff coming forward this fall on that. And then what's also on your agenda for tomorrow that I want to speak about is DOLA has actually released, they are opening it back up for funding for broadband. I think, as you guys know, it was on hold due to the state Supreme Court decision. So the August 1st cycle has been opened back up for September 6th. So as this all links together, is what we're working on is actually submitting a grant application for the redevelopment of, I gotta look at the diagram, of Elephant, Red Hill, and Thomasville, which are critical for public safety and the DTRS system, as well as was identified in our broadband study as some of the key linkages to really creating this primary network to be able to move forward. And so we're working on a grant application to submit to DOLA for funding support for that. It'll be a $1.7 million grant application. And then also in tandem, given the lessons that we've learned, is working with the Forest Service now of what NEPA process, because all three of those sites also sit on Forest Service property. So we have existing leases, but we'll still require NEPA from the Forest Service. And so we'll be working on that this fall and winter. So hopefully come the summer we can build and it'll be a learning process again all over. So
yeah. Now, are any of those sites, I'm sure they are to some extent, useful to the Forest Service themselves? Could this be a potential joint application to a NEPA process, or?
That's a great question. I know that the access in Elephant is a big barrier for other agencies. So I know, for example, the state agency for the public safety, given the access to Elephant, and I do believe I've heard Forest Service talk about it, but we can revisit that. It's a great point that we can bring up when we talk to them about what the redevelopment process is and where they would like to partner.
What I'm thinking is maybe before that meeting would be to talk with Gary Tenenbaum and Open Space and Trails about how they did a joint process with ACES and the Forest Service about the Smuggler Mountain Management Plan, and they reached agreement before it was even submitted into NEPA, and I've been told that speeded it up probably 18 months. And so if there's a way to mirror that type of process with these NEPAs, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I should say all three of these will require, I shouldn't say only, they require a categorical exclusion, which is the lowest level of review because we have existing leases. So it's just making sure that it's on the Forest Service's work plan because it still does take review on their part. And that we're, like you said, all on the same page before the application ever gets submitted to them.
Great, very good. Michael?
Were we trying to bury a cable to Elephant Mountain? What happened there?
We did. We didn't bury it. It's above.
We did not bury it?
We did not. It's not, and maybe Drew can speak about this better than I can. It's a not primary line, but a service line, and so it was never buried since the establishment of that site. And so we rebuilt the line because it was, open and available. So we put it in piping, somewhat. Armored cable, but it is actually not buried. It is above ground in armored cable, and we completed that in 2014. We completed that in 2014, but we didn't do any upgrades to the actual tower and building site at that time.
So is it sufficient for the upgrades?
The power is.
The power is.
Yes.
And what's the expected life of that cable?
That's a great question.
The last one was there since the 60s, and it had a lot of animals that were chewing on it. Its major problem, which is why the Forest Service approved the armored cable.
Okay, so if you could just find out the life of it, the expected life, and some sort of inspection schedule on that cable
Absolutely.
should be established. So.
Yeah. And I'm glad you bring that up. The other piece that just to give you guys the overview that we're working on for this fall is to bring this all together in some kind of maintenance master plan that identifies, so it's not just the 3 or 4 staff that are sitting here now, but the staff that are here in 10 or 15 years, that we don't have a repeat of the infrastructure being lost along the way. So that's a great piece to add in there.
We'd like you here in 10 or 15 years.
Any additional questions or comments?
Thank you.
These items will be coming to us tomorrow. Thank you on the grant application. Is there any additional letters of support that we should be collecting for that? When is the application due?
So the application due is September 6th. We've reached out. We've actually already received a letter of support from Eagle County Emergency Management. We've reached out to the COM Board, Carbondale Fire, Basalt Fire, and State OIT are going to look at and probably sign a letter of support, and then I need to reach out to Garfield County Emergency Management. So if there's other suggestions you guys think of, I'm happy to reach out.
I was just thinking of the Aspen Young Professionals Group, or that technology group that hosted the forum not long ago, and just that it's part of a greater system we hope to pursue, perhaps other chambers of commerces or business organizations. You know, it might not be the tower that gets it to them yet, but it's part of a system that can get it to them.
Great.
So I would really try to pursue a few letters like that.
Okay, great suggestion.
Okay. Anything else? There being nothing, we'll move on to the next item. Thank you for your time very much, and thank you for your patience with our schedule today. Okay.
And so, Rachel, my suggestion would be to go to board open discussion, and then as time allows, any review of future agendas before adjourning into our next special meeting and executive session.
Okay.
I just have 2 quick updates for you. One, very exciting news. You probably saw the email already, but we have hired a new finance director. Ann Driggers will be starting on October 17th. She had a very successful day with the organization, going through a number of interview panels. We got very positive feedback across the board. I think, Patty, you're the only commissioner for the meet and greet, but we're very, very excited to be able to bring Ann on board. She'll be starting with us October 17th. Also finance related, just to bring back to the board on our certificates of participation, we have just closed the bid process, so we are evaluating responses right now from underwriters, and we'll be bringing that back to the board at some point pretty quickly. It's been telegraphed out there that interest rates might go up again sooner than we expected because of positive jobs and earnings reports. So we have completed at least that RFP process. We're in the process now of evaluating the responses, and staff will be meeting on that over the next week, and then bring a proposal forward to the board for the board's approval to pursue.
Very good. Any questions on that? John, Michael?
No questions on that.
Okay, go ahead.
That's all I have on open discussion.
Michael?
So just for Jody, on a question on this alleyway out here, you know, there are manhole, I mentioned this before, the manhole covers, and it's just, it looks like the work is unfinished out there. And
Is it a city project?
yeah, it's a city project, but it's a public right of way, and
Yeah.
it seems to me that this project should be finished. And also on this building, along the edge of the bottom flashing, there are loose bricks that seem to be put there as spacers, but they're not fixed. So they're not in very good order, and the building's just been finished. So I don't know what's going on there. It concerns me.
I think on the alleyway, we had heard that the city has warranty issues with the contractor about completing the work. And so they're in a little bit of a dispute about how that's turned out and how that's going to be redone. The other issue I don't know anything about, and you're right that we should certainly check into the alley
Yeah,
situation.
and Michael, just to be clear on where the bricks are,
So the wall comes down, then you have some flashing that comes out and then turns down again. Well, that seems to be resting on bricks, but they're loose. So it looks like to me, it looks like poor construction. Yeah, along
this edge here.
Right along this corner.
Okay. I'll have to ask
I
about
assume it's everywhere, but it doesn't seem like good construction. So.
Okay, we'll look into that.
Okay, Patty?
Yeah, I just want the board to know that at the last minute, for some reason, the board was supposed to have been invited to the Accra Ski Company event at Bumps. Was it Thursday or Friday?
I think that was Thursday of last week.
And I got a last minute invitation through somebody at Ski Company, so I went out and I thought it was just kind of a meet and greet about the FIS championships in March. There was a lot more discussion. There's a presentation about the base at 1A and the hotels, and Mike Kaplan did. And then they did a panel discussion with Kristen Cooper was the moderator, Michaela Schifrin spoke, cute girl, Marolt spoke, Mr. Bill Marolt? Bill Marolt? From the Ski, from CU, and then Bob Biotti was there. So it was a really good discussion, and then they went to questions or whatever and comments, and I stood up and commented on behalf of the county since I was the only one there, and just said that thank you for the presentation. We're excited about the FIS games. I mentioned that I wanted to be clear that the races end in the city of Aspen, but they start in Pitkin County. To which there was great applause and laughter, and that Pitkin County would be glad to have a seat at the table during the planning, because it's going to be a huge event coming just a couple weeks after X Games. And so I did not volunteer anything, no cash, no signing of checks. I did say that we would help with rallying volunteers, and I'm going to ask John Peacock if it's okay to speak with Phyllis, because she gets involved in these races. She's really good at the volunteer side of it. It's going to take extensive volunteers to pull this event off. They found that in Vail. I know Phyllis was part of the Vail event, so it'll be a great experience for us. But I just want to give the boards a head up that that was the presentation, so it's pretty exciting to get that event here. So we'll see.
Great.
Yeah, great, Patty. And we'll probably, at some point, I'm sure we'll be involving the airport, because we'll have during that time period, we'll have people coming from all over the world.
Yep, it's going to be huge.
Yeah, oh boy.
Yeah, and it is not unprecedented for us we do provide volunteer hours for our employees to volunteer out in the community, and we have leveraged that into larger special events to provide opportunities, and World Cup may be appropriate.
Yeah, and they said it's a perfect time for you to volunteer, an afternoon or a day. You don't have to start, come at the beginning and stay till the end. You can, they're really taking people from whatever they can get. And I know Phyllis has had great experience with volunteering for major races, so she might be a good point person for us to start that effort.
Yeah, very good, Patty. Other board member open discussion items? I'll give you a real quick brief. I attended the Colorado Child Care Advisory Program or something they're having down in, it was in Denver. It's a beginning of a series of 3 meetings, and I've been in communications with Mitzi and Nan about it. But essentially, the state is going to be ending the closeout provisions for the child welfare, child care subsidies. And we've always kind of depended on those as they're fluctuating numbers. I am not sure what the state is going to propose in the future. It was really interesting to find out that the funding they have and the number of people eligible is only 2% of the people eligible for that sort of financial assistance are enrolled in those programs. Now, that could be they're unaware of the programs. It could be that they don't have money left. It could be that they've decided to work at home and don't need childcare, or go without a second income for a period of time. Part of the logic seems to be that the state will not allocate more money for that program because there are no wait lists. And so when the closeout happens, they don't have wait lists, but it can be very problematic for counties. As you remember, we seem to have slots for about 15 people, and if those are all filled, and some people come into the program who have mandatory acceptance, you have to accept them, and it would be out of your general fund without that traditional don't worry, it'll be okay at the end. We're going to see closeout. So I was there to represent the West Slope interests, and it was interesting, or, ours, and Route was there, and Summit was there pretty heavily, but we were the only ones outside of the major metro Denver area to really be participating live. It was also very interesting to see how many child care and child advocacy groups there were there, as opposed to counties or people who are actually administering the program, which seems to be very intense on the Front Range. But, as they kind of asked the question, well, how should the state go about administering a statewide program, a statewide system? And it's like, well, maybe you should start having some meetings in Grand Junction or in other parts of the state that are not as specific to just the Denver area. So there are changes coming down the pike. I was there to raise a few good questions and add some input. It really is a difficult program. They're going to what they call tiered reimbursement, where some child care providers will get higher reimbursement rates if they are offering more of a quality product to the children. But that means there's less money to go around to all children. And so they're really, really struggling with this program. And I explained, again, that you shouldn't be punished if you live in a county with a high cost of living area, where child care providers are just that much more expensive and hard to manage, and that could some of this funds start to go towards capital as well for actually expanding the child care opportunities. So that was that, and I'll let that go. John, do you have anything, or anybody have anything else on future agendas that we want to cover really quickly?
No.
I have a quick list.
Okay, Patty,
Just
thank
real
you.
quick, John, on September 6th work session, which is coming up, I don't know if you're going to revise it. We need to have a break between open space and because there's no break from 10 to 3. Okay? I just think we need one. And I really have to apologize for this. I still don't see a pre-discussion on the Deer Creek open space issue prior to our first reading. Our first reading is set for, I had it on here. It's set for September 14th, and I don't see, we were supposed to discuss that before we went to first reading. It's the agreement with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
Okay.
And it was on there, but I can't find it.
Is it been combined into the joint meeting with Open Space and Trails by chance? But at any rate, we'll let John resolve
could you just?
I know we saw it.
Remember we saw it before, and I'm like, I know it was here.
Sorry, I'm just not finding it right off.
Okay, we'll have John look at that.
Okay.
And see where
If you
that
can,
is.
John. And also on September 14th, under land use public hearings, we have 2 first readings under that section, and those first readings should be separate because they're not public hearings on first readings. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's item number 2 and item number 4 on the 14th.
September 14th.
Yeah, and then we have a joint meeting apparently scheduled for October 4th with the city of Aspen, so we need to have an agenda pre-meeting discussion that's not scheduled. And one last question. On the 25th, we have 4 hours, really, of flourishing natural environment, etc. 4 hours. I just wanted to make sure that was correct.
It's the beginning of the budget.
Okay.
We usually take more than that. Our
well, thank
strategy
you
is
for
that
helping
we're so
me.
exhausted by the end of it.
You just say yes? All right. That's all I had. Thank you.
Did anyone else have any future agenda items? Okay, there being none. John, was there anything else you wanted to cover with the remainder of this time?
No, I do want to cover the items that we had scheduled for the executive session.
Okay, and I will ask.
We can keep those under negotiate, the 2 that are listed.
Somehow I just missed up
Want a motion?
today's agenda with my future agendas. To find the citations is going to be hard.
You can read through my scribbles.
I can make a motion, including that.
I'd like to get a motion to go into a special meeting, an executive session, for the purposes of talking about personnel and negotiation. Those are consistent with Colorado Revised Statutes 24-6-402, 4E, and 4F.
So moved.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Any opposed? There are none.
What did we do with
We are
our,
going
did we
into
adjourn our
executive
special meeting from earlier? Do we have
I
to
thought I
adjourn that
did,
special
but-
meeting?
We did. Yeah, but you need to be in special meeting for exec, so we can adjourn
We can
that.
do it all at the same time. Okay.
And
Okay,
we're
so we're
going
going
to
over
be.
to the Plaza 3 building. Grassroots, you can turn off.
Thank
and
you,
Thank you so
Grassroots.
much,
See you
and we'll see you tomorrow.
John, I'm
Sorry
I'm just
about
gonna,
that.
I'm gonna.
They
hurt
say
on
I'm not
you.
contagious.
Keep drinking a lot of fluids. Bring this stuff up.